Several hundred years ago, the state of Joseon was located on the territory of modern Korea. There were a lot of people living in this state who were engaged in ordinary everyday things, such as agriculture, fishing, and so on. However, what made this state unusual was that almost all of its inhabitants trained every day to become stronger and develop their physique. Yu Suji was the ruler of this state, and he carefully ensured that the inhabitants of his state became stronger and more resilient every day. Every morning, Suji came to his people to supervise how his people were doing their training. Even during their work, many residents did not forget about their training and performed it as carefully as possible. Also, the people of Joseon State had a special place where they trained as hard as they could every morning, and every morning Suji came to this place to supervise the training of his people. There were a lot of exercise machines in this place, which were similar to modern exercise machines, thanks to which the people of Joseon could train their bodies much more effectively. Thanks to Suji, most of the men in Joseon had a strong and pumped-up physique. In addition to training, some men also adopted a special diet to make it easier for them to build their muscle mass. However, not all men found it so easy to pump up their bodies, and many found it very difficult to pump up their bodies. While some men pumped up their muscles with ease, others tried their best not to pass out during training. Many Joseon men found it difficult to endure such training, but they still tried their best to become even stronger. Suji was very proud that his people were becoming stronger and more courageous every day. Several centuries have passed since then, and modern Korea was formed in the place where the state used to be. Choi Yong-jik was an ordinary Korean who was actively involved in sports and began to study the history of his country at one of the state universities. Yong-jik began training since he went to serve in the army, where there were extremely harsh conditions and strict discipline. During his service in the army, Yong-jik began to become very interested in bodybuilding, and after the army he began to study at one of the state universities in the history department. However, even after Yong-jik began studying at university, he still did not stop training. Yong-jik began going to the gym, watching his diet and leading a healthy lifestyle, and after some time his physique became even more pumped up and strong. After some time, Yong-jik was able to obtain a sports-level certificate, and he decided to celebrate with his friends. That evening, Yong-jik and his friends had a good time, and after the celebration, everyone went home in a good mood. Soon, Yong-jik returned home and he decided to have a little snack and watch a couple of videos on the Manhwa Recaps channel before bedtime. After watching a couple of videos, Yong-jik saw in his recommendations feed a documentary video about the state of Joseon and its ruler Sejong. At one point in the video, they said that Sejong lived a very short life, and Yong-jik thought that it was because of this that Sejong did not exercise and did not lead a healthy lifestyle. At one point, Yong-jik began to fall asleep and think about what would happen if he ended up in Joseon and became a sports instructor there. Yong-jik then began to imagine how he could develop a fighting force in Joseon and thereby rewrite the history of Joseon. Yong-jik thought it would be great, after which he quickly fell asleep before even reaching the bed. The next morning, Yong-jik woke up to someone asking him about his cough. In addition to the stranger's voice, Yong-jik was very soon awakened by the crowing of a rooster. Yong-jik didn't understand where the rooster's crowing could be coming from, and he just decided that he drank too much beer last night. While Yong-jik was trying to wake up, he wanted to pick up his phone, but he discovered that his phone was not nearby. Also, Yong-jik did not understand why he woke up not in his apartment, but in a traditional Korean house. However, what shocked Yong-jik the most was why, instead of a pumped-up and strong body, he had a very thin and weak body. Meanwhile, the unfamiliar voice continued to tell Yong-jik that it was already morning and that it was time for him to get up. Yong-jik could not believe his eyes, and he decided to open the door of the house, hoping to understand what happened to him. Yong-jik opened the door of the house, and a man stood next to him, who asked Yong-jik if his cough had gone away. Yong-jik also saw a small courtyard in which there were people in traditional clothes. Yong-jik did not understand anything, and he asked the man standing next to him what his name was. At first, the man did not understand Yong-jik's question, and he told him that his name was Yu Suji, and then Yong-jik assumed that his father's name was Lee Do. The man then confirmed that Suji's father was none other than Lee Do Sejong, who was the fourth ruler of Joseon. Suji then believed that since his father was known as Sejong the Great, then Suji was the great Prince Jinyang. Based on all this data, Yongjik realized that he had somehow mysteriously ended up in Joseon, and that he was that very great Prince Jinyang. Jinyang couldn't believe that he was actually in Joseon, and he felt that everything seemed too realistic to him. At one point, one of his subjects called Yong Jinyan, and then Yong remembered that he actually ended up somewhere in the middle of the 15th century, when Joseon still existed. Then Jinyang began to get very nervous, because he knew what significant historical figures he would have to see, including the fourth king of Joseon, Sejong. Jinyang began to get more and more nervous, and soon Sejong himself called him to give him a special task, and finding himself in the same room with Sejong, Jinyang was simply shocked by what he saw. At this moment, Jinyang saw a very round Sejong in front of him, who was having a very hard time breathing, and he was nothing like the Sejong that Jinyang had read about in history books in his previous life. Jinyang couldn't hide his surprise, and Sejong simply assumed that Jinyang simply hadn't woken up yet and hadn't had time to come to his senses. At one point, Jinyang decided to bow down to Sejong just in case, but Sejong himself did not understand what Jinyang was doing. Suddenly, unexpectedly for himself, Jinyan noticed how much the structure of his speech and his vocabulary had changed, and he began to speak the same way as all the inhabitants of Joseon times. Then Jinyang began to apologize to Sejong for showing such ignorance, but Sejong himself said that he did not hear any ignorance in his son's words. After this, Sejong told Jinyang that he really appreciated his talents, and so he asked Jinyang to rewrite the Kangmok, which described all the events in Joseon. Sejong said that to carry out this assignment, Jinyang must go to the Chihyeonjong Educational Institution, after which Jinyang went to Chipyeongjong. After some time, Jinyang reached Chipyeongjong, where many different scientists usually gather, where they conducted their scientific research. Once in Chipyeongjong, Jinyang thought that if he found himself in this era, then he would have to regularly visit this place in search of various historical data about Joseon. One of the visitors to Chipyeongjong told Jinyang that if he could rewrite the Kangmok, he would receive many praises, and the people of Joseon would honor Jinyang even more. However, Jinyang told the stranger that Yong, the Grand Prince of Anpiyong State, had much better handwriting, and the stranger thought that Jinyang was just being a little modest. After a couple of minutes, Jinyang began to study Kangmok, and he was surprised that he not only understood the local speech well, but also perfectly understood the local written language. After a couple of seconds, Jinyang noticed that the Kangmok had very large characters, and he believed that Sejong had some vision problems. Jinyang also applied his knowledge as a sports instructor from a past life, and he concluded that his father Sejong suffered from second-degree obesity, which led him to serious health problems. In addition, Jinyang noticed that even though it was quite cool this morning, Sejong's face was dripping with a lot of sweat. Jinyang then concluded that the fourth king of Joseon, Sejong, suffered from severe diabetes. From his past life, Jinyang knew that with such indicators, Sejong would soon die and leave behind a successor. Sejong's successor will be Jinyang's older brother Lee Hyang, who will receive the title of King Munjong, who will also die soon after the coronation from severe weakening in the body. After King Munjong, Tanjong will sit on the throne, but during his reign, an assassin will break into his royal palace and kill all the representatives of the royal family, including Tanjong himself. Then Jinyang thought that he should never allow Sejong to die so early. Soon, Lee Hyang, who was Sejong's eldest son and who was to become the next successor to the royal throne, arrived in Chipyeongjong. Entering Chipyeongjong, I was somewhat surprised that Jinyang was here, since he usually prefers to go to the mountains to hunt. Jinyang believed that Lee Hyang came here for some urgent matter, but Lee Hyang said that he just wanted to check the current condition of the books that would be sent to Sejong. After that, Lee Hyang headed towards the exit and told Jinyang that he didn't want to distract him and that he could continue to do his own thing. However, Jinyang did not understand how Lee Hyang did not notice that the books that were supposed to be sent to Sejong had too small characters, and he decided to stop Lee Hyang. Jinyang told his elder brother that he would like to read some of these books, but the characters were too small and needed to be rewritten to make them easier to read. Then Li Xiang felt that Jin Yang really had something to add to these books, and he asked Jin Yang if he knew that Sejong had presbyopia, or senile farsightedness. Jin Yang then told his elder brother that he suspected something similar, but he was not completely sure of his guesses. Then Li Xiang thought about the transience of life, since before his father very often boasted of his greatness. Then Jin Yang asked Li Xiang when Sejong began to show such symptoms, and Li Xiang said that such deterioration in Sejong's condition began to appear a year ago. Li Xiang also said that this presbyopia was very different from normal presbyopia, and that Sejong had other symptoms in addition to poor vision, but he asked Jin Yang to keep this information secret. Soon, Li Xiang decided to leave Jipyongjong, and after he left, several scientists entered the room. Soon, Jin Yang began to feel a slight pain in the back of his head, and he believed that it was because he had been sitting still for too long. Then Jin Yang decided to do a little stretching for his neck to get rid of the pain. First, Jin Yan tilted his head back, after which he began to rotate his head to stretch his cervical vertebrae. After this, Jin Yang stretched his head forward and his shoulders back, and after all these actions, all the pain in the back and back of the head disappeared. At this moment, Jin Yan experienced an incredible sensation of missing pain, while the people who were looking at him did not understand what Jin Yan had just done and why he suddenly felt so good. People did not understand why Jin Yang made such unusual movements, since if he has neck pain, he can turn to a massage therapist. At first, Jin Yang didn't understand why these people were looking at him so strangely, and then he remembered that these people still don't know what stretching is. At that time, people had already begun to practice massage therapy, but at that time it was not very effective, since at that time people did not yet know how human muscles work. Jin Yan then told people that he had recently injured his neck while riding a horse, but after these movements, all the pain in his neck completely disappeared, and he immediately felt better. Jin Yang also said that this simple exercise is very good for the neck muscles, and he said that he can easily teach them to do this exercise. After that, everyone sat down at the chairs, and Jin Yan began to show them the correct sequence of movements. First, people threw their heads back as much as possible, after which they began to rotate their heads in different directions. With the last movement, people had to straighten their backs, stretch their heads forward, and throw their shoulders back. At first, people did not believe that they could so easily get rid of pain in the neck area, but after all the body movements they had done, they immediately felt extremely pleasant sensations. The next day, Li Xiang went to Jipyongjong again, but he was somewhat surprised at the pace of what everyone was doing. Li Xiang did not understand how these people could get rid of neck pain in such an easy way and without the help of a massage therapist. Soon, everyone in Joseon learned about an exercise that could relieve neck pain, and soon this exercise became known as the stretching whale. However, despite such an effective exercise, Jin Yang still had another headache. To get rid of this headache, Jin Yang went to the local market, where all the necessary ingredients were located. One of the local sellers was extremely surprised that Jin Yang himself deigned to go to the market with ordinary people, since usually representatives of the royal family try not to contact the residents. Jin Yang told the seller that he came here to buy oil such as sesame, but the seller said that he did not have sesame oil, but he did have beef oil. Then Jin Yang handed the money to the seller and asked him to provide him with 5 pieces of beef butter, and that its quality be as low as possible. Suddenly, one of the customers wondered why Jin Yang needed such ingredients as beef butter and several medicinal roots. From his previous life, Jin Yang knew that he was going to die from dermatitis, and he decided to collect the necessary medicines as soon as possible, since in these times, dermatitis was considered a fatal and incurable disease. After some time, Jin Yan bought all the ingredients needed for the medicine, after which he returned home. Soon, a woman appeared behind Jin Yang and said that she noticed how Jin Yang began to increasingly go to the neighboring street. Jin Yang then called this woman his wife and told her that after reading some books in Jipyongjong, he decided to try to implement some of his experimental ideas. The woman then said that she was somewhat worried that Jin Yang now chose to do various despicable jobs instead of his favorite hunt. Jin Yang told his wife that he was in Jipyongjong and there he found an old book that stated the creation of an invention for washing the body, and he would like to create it. This very invention that Jinyan wanted to make was ordinary soap, and Jinyan believed that in Joseon he could not do without it. In the 21st century, people can still experience various skin diseases that are caused by wearing dirty clothes, thereby causing various inflammations. Any dirt such as rust or sweat could also lead to further development of skin diseases. One day, Yongjik wanted to try making soap himself, and he turned to the grandmother of the owner of the gym where he worked and trained. The ingredients used were natural olive oil, water, and the ash of burnt rice straw. And when all these ingredients were mixed and heated, an excellent soap was produced. However, Jinyang's wife did not understand how to wash herself with oil, because if the oil gets on the skin, the body will only become dirtier. Then Jinyang told his wife that thanks to soap, you can not only wash yourself, but also wash away various stains and dirt on clothes, which made the process of washing clothes and washing your body much easier. After that, Jinyang's wife was silent for a while and moved on, and Jinyang for a moment thought that his wife was dissatisfied with something, and he felt that his relationship with his wife was very strained. Jinyang did not dwell on his wife's behavior and went to the kitchen, where he wanted to prepare soap. Jinyang experimented with the proportions of the ingredients, and after several attempts he was able to achieve the desired foaming. Despite the good foaming, Jinyang was wondering how effective his soap would be. The resulting liquid began to give off a strong, unpleasant odor, and Jinyang decided that he should try this soap first. Soon the soap-making liquid hardened, and then Jinyang cut out several pieces of soap and went to test his soap in practice. After this, Jinyang decided to take it to test the soap in action, and even with some minor shortcomings, the soap cleaned Jinyang's body and clothes well. Jinyang especially liked the pleasant smell of the soap, which was obtained thanks to the sesame oil in the soap. At one point, Jinyang believed that he would be able to establish mass production of his soap and sell it abroad. However, Jinyang suddenly began to worry about Sejong's current condition, as even Taijong, Sejong's father, had failed to get his son to do anything with his body. Then Jinyang believed that even if his own father could not force Sejong to solve the problem of his condition, then he certainly would not be able to persuade Sejong to take care of his health. Then Jinyang thought that if he somehow tried to persuade Sejong to take up sports, then Sejong would probably think that his son was just doing nonsense. Jinyang also feared that otherwise Sejong would send him to Muryongdo or Talamdo, which are now known as Uleongdo and Jejudo. When Jinyang finished washing, he figured that he needed to outsmart Sejong with logic to deal with his obesity. Jinyang also felt that he himself should lose weight and build muscle mass, and perhaps this could also influence Sejong's decision to go in for sports. At first, Jinyan planned to do 3 basic exercises so that over time his muscles and body would become stronger and so that he could lift 400 kilograms of weight. Jinyang also thought about making bodybuilding a real science and writing a book on bodybuilding. Jinyang was confident that if people began to study bodybuilding and train hard, he would be able to create one of the most powerful states of the 15th century. Jinyang also believed that if a person tries to bring to an ideal state the body that his parents gave him, then he shows respect to his parents. After washing, Jinyang went outside where he wanted to start training, and the first thing he wanted to start with was pull-ups. Many people who looked at Jinyang began to suspect that there was simply something wrong with Jinyang and that he had gone crazy. After doing the pull-ups, Jinyang noticed that this body had a very interesting natural predisposition. After the pull-ups, Jinyang began weighted arm extensions and curls and managed to complete this exercise 29 times. After doing arm extensions and curls, Jinyang began doing push-ups, and he was able to do as many as 82 push-ups in a row. After doing the push-ups, Jinyang decided to do the dragon plank, and he did this exercise so many times that at one point he just stopped counting how many times he did the dragon plank. Suddenly, Jinyang noticed that even with such a large and sagging belly, he performed all the exercises without any difficulty. Then Jinyang believed that this was all thanks to the genes of Taijo Li Seonggae, the founder and first ruler of Joseon. Soon, Jinyang finished his training, and at that moment people came to him and brought him his goods. These people brought Jinyang several iron dumbbells, with which Joseon could perform even more different exercises. After this, the pleased Jin Young told the people that he would pay back right now for the fact that these people had made him such excellent dumbbells. Jin Young received his dumbbells and gave the people 80 kilograms of rice as payment for their work, after which the people looked at the happy Jin Young with suspicion and moved on. On the way, people were discussing how crazy Jin Young was, since he gave 80 kilograms of rice for these pieces of iron, because even samurai do not have such an urgent need for so much iron. Then the first man began to worry that Jin Young was planning to gather an army, but the second man said that they had just done their job and they shouldn't worry about anything else. At this moment, Jin Young had already started training with dumbbells, since exercises with his own weight were not enough for him to effectively pump his body and muscles. Jin Young's wife's servant, who saw Jin Young training, told his wife that there was something wrong with Prince Jin Young. Also, Jin Young's wife's servant said that they needed to take some action, but Jin Young's wife said that she didn't want to talk about it. However, Jin Young's wife's servant continued to talk about how Prince Jin Young first began to cover himself with oil while washing, and now he gave 80 kilograms of rice for an ordinary pile of iron. Also, Jin Young's wife's servants remembered the times when Prince Jin Young used to enjoy hunting with his friends and began to completely ignore his wife. Then Jin Young's wife's servant asked her mistress what she did in her past life that her husband stopped paying attention to her. Then Jin Young's wife again asked her servant to stop talking about it, after which the servant immediately apologized and fell silent. At this moment, Jin Young's wife began to remember with warmth in her heart the times when she and her husband walked around the palace grounds and how cherry blossoms grew everywhere. During another walk through the palace courtyard, Jin Young gave his wife a cherry blossom branch as a sign of his love and devotion to her. At this moment, Jin Young's wife picked up that same branch to cut it into 2 parts, thinking that every day she was losing her husband more and more. Jin Young's wife cut a cherry blossom branch and told her servants that she would like to go to bed early today and that she would like to be alone with her thoughts. A couple of minutes later, Jin Young's wife went to wash herself, and next to the candles she saw the soap that Jin Young had made. Jin Young's wife took the soap in her hands, looking at it and trying to understand exactly how they should wash. Suddenly, Jin Young's wife decided to try washing herself with soap, and she began to slowly and carefully rub the soap over her body. Jin Young's wife was surprised at how the soap started producing so many bubbles and how effectively the soap cleaned her skin. After another workout, Jin Young decided to wash himself again, and he thought that at his next workout, he should start training with even more weight. Suddenly, someone entered the bathhouse, and then Jin Young noticed that it turned out to be his wife. Jin Young was very happy when his wife told him that she liked his soap, which cleaned her body perfectly. The only thing that Jin Young's wife didn't like was that the soap had too much of an oil smell, and she was afraid that people passing by would think that she was the wife of a soap merchant. Then Jin Young thought that he should replace the sesame oil with pork or beef oil, but all these oils were very expensive, which would interfere with the mass production and sale of soap. Then Jin Young's wife suggested that her husband use linseed oil instead of sesame oil, which would make the soap have a more pleasant smell and make its production cheaper. After that, Jin Young thanked his wife, to which Jin Young's wife herself said that it was all nothing, after which she immediately became embarrassed. After this, Jin Young went to a coastal village where one of Jin Young's acquaintances lived. Soon, Jin Young reached this village, and there he met the same acquaintance who had been a beater during his last winter hunt. While hunting, this man was seriously injured when he was attacked by a deer, and that time this man saved Jin Young by taking the full wrath of the angry deer upon himself. Jin Young said that even though a lot of time has passed since then, he still remembers how this man helped him, and Jin Young wanted to thank this man. Jin Young told the man that he would now send his family 2 bags of rice, 2 bottles of sesame oil, eggs, chicken, and other food items once every 2 weeks. In exchange for this, Jin Young only asked the man to report to him every 2 weeks information about changes in the height and weight of his children. After this, Jin Young decided to provide similar food support to 20 more villages and begin to record changes in the height and weight of local children. At first, Jin Young wanted to give local residents a protein, carbohydrate, and fat diet in order to record changes in the children's physique and their motor abilities. Jin Yang also wanted to show Sejong by a clear example how important it is to stick to proper nutrition so that it would be easier to get him to start taking care of his health. After this, Jin Yang went to the local blacksmiths, whom he wanted to ask to make him several things. First, Jinyan showed the blacksmiths a diagram of a training barbell and several iron plates for the future barbell. Jin Yang also explained to the blacksmiths that iron plates should be mounted on both ends of the bar and that each iron pancake should weigh 30 kilograms. The blacksmiths carried out simple calculations and realized that if they made 8 such iron pancakes, then the entire training structure would weigh more than 200 kilograms. Jin Yang also said that over time he would need even more of these iron pancakes. The blacksmiths were shocked when Jinyan said that this barbell should be strong and stable enough so that in the future he could lift a weight of 300 kilograms. After that, Jinyan put his hand into his sleeve, pulled out another diagram, and said that he had one more thing to do. Jin Yang took out a drawing and asked the blacksmiths to make one iron plate and roll its rod about 3 feet long. Jin Yang wondered whether, given the technical conditions of the Joseon era, it would be possible to make a working Joseon, a firearm that was previously used in Joseon. On the way home, Jinyan thought about how he had undergone many positive changes since he arrived in this era. Also on the way home, Jinyan told one of the blacksmiths with whom he was walking that now with all his heart he wants to restore order in Joseon. At one point, Jin Yang decided to evaluate some of the physical parameters of the blacksmith with whom he walked to the royal estate. Jin Yang was shocked that this blacksmith had a surprisingly very strong and muscular body, to which the blacksmith himself said that he had had such a physique since childhood. Then Jin Yang believed that this blacksmith would be ideal for his first tests, and he invited the blacksmith to become his student on the path of improving his body. The young blacksmith immediately accepted Jin Yang's offer and did not know how he could thank Jin Yang, to which Jin Yang himself said that there was no need for this. The next day, Jin Yang was going to meet his brother in Chipyeongjong. Soon, Jin Yang met with Li Hyang, and Li Hyang immediately noticed some changes in Jin Yang. Li Hyang was happy that his brother managed to lose weight, and then he asked Jin Yang what he wanted to talk to him about. Jin Yang then told Li Hyang that his complexion had improved after his new tempering method, and then Li Hyang asked Jin Yang what other new tempering method he was talking about. After that, Jin Yang took out a small box, opened it, and showed Li Hyang his soap, after which he asked his elder brother to try using the soap. After that, Jin Yang and Li Hyang went outside to the same water source, where Li Hyang was supposed to try Jin Yang's soap. After a couple of minutes, Li Hyang was pleasantly surprised at how the soap was able to clean the dirt off his hands so easily. However, when Li Hyang smelled his hands, he told Jin Yang that the oil would make soap production very expensive. Then Jin Yang remembered his wife's words that if in the process of making soap you use tetradium oil along with a couple of handfuls of rice, the production will be cheaper. After that, Jin Yang and Li Hyang returned back to Chipyeongjong, where Li Hyang took out a piece of paper and began to write something down there. Jin Yayan picked up a piece of paper on which Li Hyang wrote that he managed to get rid of severe dirt thanks to soap, and that now all officials should wash their hands with soap every day. Li Hyang believed that despite the price of soap, almost anyone could afford it, but due to the unknown nature of soap, no one would buy it in large quantities. Li Hyang also said that first, he would like to force all officials to wash their hands with soap, so that in the future, they will start washing their entire bodies with soap. In addition, Li Hyang proposed to first start selling soap at private auctions so that he could impose his own tax on it and thereby receive a new source of income. Then Jin Yang was once again convinced that Li Hyang truly fully justified his status as the future king of Joseon. Meanwhile, the blacksmiths were actively working to create all those items that Jin Yang ordered from them. At one point, one man asked the blacksmith workers if they were sure that Jin Yang ordered exactly what they were doing. Then one of the blacksmiths said that they would face severe punishment if they made even one mistake during their work. However, one of the blacksmiths told all the other blacksmiths that they must right now destroy everything that they had already managed to do during this time for Jin Yang. However, All the other blacksmiths said that they could not do this, since they had already made most of the things for Jin Yang, and that Jin Yang should already come for his orders in the coming days. Then this blacksmith told his workers that if they value money more than their own lives, then they can continue to work on products for Jin Yang. At one point, a man in a black suit and a large hat began to suspect that Jin Yang started all this because he was unable to obtain the right to inherit. Then Li Qi felt that he now fully realized how dishonest a person Jin Yang really was. The next day, Li Hyang ordered all officials to use the soap that Jin Yang created. Soon, many officials began discussing with each other how they could easily clean ink stains from their hands using soap. People were especially surprised that in addition to ink on their hands, soap also helped remove oil from the skin, considering soap to be some kind of incredible miracle cure. The officials were also very surprised that all this soap was created by Jin Yang, who had never before done such things that were useful to people. Meanwhile, Jin Yang was actively training with new barbells and iron plates for them. The first thing Jin Yang wanted to do was do some bench presses, which were great for pumping up the chest and arm muscles. After a couple of minutes, Jin Yang managed to bench press 10 times in a row with a total barbell weight of 120 kilograms. After the exercises, Jin Yang was amazed that his muscles were developing so quickly, as if the god of bodybuilding himself was helping him. Jin Yang finished doing the bench press, and the blacksmith who was belaying Jin Yang during the exercise told Jin Yang that he was doing a great job lifting such a large weight. Jin Yang believed that even though this barbell was more like the barbells that no one usually uses in the gym, it was still very useful. However, at first, Jin Yang had some difficulties in making all these rods and iron plates, since the blacksmiths not only did not have time to complete their work, but also did not cope with the overall design. After Jin Yang finished the exercises, he told his blacksmith that it was his turn to exercise. The blacksmith immediately got scared and told Jin Yang that if he tried to lift this barbell would immediately crush him. Then Jin Yang, with a terrifying look, told his blacksmith that the human body must always develop and that it constantly needs to be hardened. After a couple of seconds, the blacksmith finally decided to try to lift the barbell, and during the exercise, Jin Yang told the blacksmith that during this exercise, he should use both the upper and lower parts of the body. Jin Yang's wife was very surprised by her husband's new transformation, since she believed that her husband was quite slender before, and now his body seemed to shine with strength. Meanwhile, Jin Yang's wife's servants felt that Jin Yang could now be compared to General Wanbong. Jin Yang is flattered to be compared to General Wanbong, and for a moment he even forgot that he had to ensure the blacksmith. Then Jin Yang began to tell his wife and her servants about how brave and courageous Wanbong was in his youth, and how in adulthood Wanbong became one of the best generals in the entire history of Joseon. While Jin Yang continued to talk about General Wanbong, the blacksmith could no longer hold the heavy barbell normally. At one point, everyone heard a very loud sound coming from the direction of the door. Later, everyone realized that someone started knocking very hard on the entrance gate. Then Jin Yang headed towards the gate with thoughts of who dared to knock on the gate so unceremoniously. Jin Yang did not have time to approach the gate, and people in dark outfits had already begun to approach from there. Among the uninvited guests was also Captain Li Qi, who was Jin Yang's longtime rival. Then Jin Yang's wife began to express indignation that these people had broken into Prince Jin Yang's domain, and such bravery greatly frightened Jin Yang's wife's servants. One of the men in dark clothes extended his hand towards Jin Yang's wife and told her that he knew where he ended up, and that he really wanted the woman to shut up right now. At the same moment, Jin Yang ran up to the stranger and pushed him hard away from his wife. The man fell to the ground and was surprised that Jin Yang was able to push him so easily and knock him down. Jin Yang asked the man how he dared to talk to his wife like that. The other men in dark clothes were greatly outraged by Jin Yang's behavior, and then they prepared their swords in case Jin Yang tried to attack them. Then Captain Li Qi came out from behind his subordinates and reminded Jin Yang how they met at last year's hunting competition. Jin Yang recognized Captain Li Qi, and he told him that if he dared to harm his people, he would attack Captain Li Qi without warning, after which he asked him why he came here. Then one of Li Qi's men got very angry at Jin Yang for talking to his captain like that, and then Li Qi told Jin Yang that what he was holding was made of 24 swords. Later, Li Qi looked at the rest of Jin Yang's rods, and then he asked Jin Yang why he suddenly needed all these rods. Also, Li Qi's people showed Jin Yang the man with whom he went hunting last year, and now this man was in very serious condition. Then Li Qi believed that Jin Yang was planning to organize a rebellion against his own family with the help of ordinary residents, in order to later become the rightful ruler of Joseon. Then Jin Yang told Li Qi that these were just his personal speculations, and then he said that Li Qi was neglecting his authority since he brought his soldiers to his house. However, Li Qi told Jin Yang that he did not need any proof, as he was fully confident that Jin Yang was planning to organize a rebellion with the help of ordinary people. Li Qi also told Jin Yang that he and his people always act this way and always reach the truth. Then Jin Yang asked Li Qi what would happen if it turned out that he was wrong in his arguments, but Li Qi completely ruled out such an option, and he was confident that he was right. Li Qi also told Jin Yang that until he told the truth, he would torture the people from the villages to which he provided supplies. Jin Yang then felt that even if he told Li Qi the whole truth, he would still not calm down and would continue to try to show his worst side. Jin Yang also thought that after he ended up in this body and in this era, he did not do anything wrong, and he could not know what bad things he could have done before. At that moment, Li Hyang came out of the house to try to understand what was happening here. Jin Yang looked at his older brother and was somewhat surprised that Li Hyang looked a little healthier than usual. Li Hyang told Jin Yang that he personally came here because some bad rumors had started circulating about him. Li Hyang was getting closer and closer to Jin Yang, and then Li Qi asked Li Hyang to be careful, since no one knows what a madman like Jin Yang can do to him. Then Li Hyang asked Li Qi to watch his speech when he called Jin Yang a madman. Li Hyang also told Li Qi that Jin Yang was still his own younger brother, and he would like to give him the opportunity to explain the reasons for his actions. Li Hyang also told Li Qi that even though they were brothers, it would not be easy for them to clear their names from such shameful rumors. Then Li Hyang said that if Li Qi did not provide him with strong arguments in favor of his personal guesses, then he would make him greatly regret his words. Jin Yang then told Li Hyang and Li Qi that he would need some help in order to explain his motives. Then Jin Yang asked the blacksmith to bring him the book he was writing, after which the blacksmith left for a while. A couple of minutes later, the blacksmith returned with the book that Jin Yang was writing, and he told everyone that he was writing a book in which he described the teachings of a healthy lifestyle. After this, Jin Yang handed over his book to Li Hyang, who became interested in what was so important described in this book. As soon as Li Hyang opened Jin Yang's book, he read that a person should express respect for his parents by caring for the body that was given to him by his parents. However, Li Hyang still could not understand how taking care of his body was connected with all the things that Jin Yang needed. Then Jin Yang leaned in front of Li Hyang and whispered to him that he couldn't say this in front of everyone, and he wanted to tell him everything in private. Then Jin Yang reminded Li Hyang of the grave condition their father was in now. Li Hyang told Jin Yang that presbyopia had struck his father before, and he would like to hear from Jin Yang his knowledge of medicine since he was so worried about their father's condition. Jin Yang then told Li Hyang that their father had recently been dripping a lot of sweat despite the cool weather, and he believed that their father was having bouts of fever. Jin Yang also said that he had some suspicions that their father was showing signs of diabetes, which somewhat surprised Li Hyang himself. Jin Yang believed that Sejong's diabetes developed due to excess yang energy, which was provoked by Sejong's excessive nutrition. Jin Yang believed that due to Sejong not engaging in any physical activity, excess yang energy was accumulating in his body, which could directly affect his vision. Then Li Hyang asked Jin Yang why he suddenly began supplying food to the children of ordinary residents of Chosnoa. Jin Yang said that in this way, he learned that for simple weight gain, it is enough to eat a few spoonfuls of rice and eggs, and his book contains all the reports on nutrition and exercise. Ultimately, Jin Yang wanted to write this book to convince Sejong of what he wrote and persuade him to take up physical activity. Li Hyang then told Li Qi to recall his soldiers, and Li Xiang said that Jin Yang had absolutely no bad intentions. However, Li Qi refused to withdraw his troops, and he said that he and his men were monitoring the behavior of the citizens of Joseon, and that the king would not like the fact that someone dared to challenge the rights of his soldiers. Li Qi also pointed to his soldiers and said that among them were the most competent inspectors of various ranks, among whom there was even one young official who had only recently joined the ranks of his inspectors. Then Li Qi said that he could not leave here until he knew all of Jin Yang's true intentions. After that, Li Qi took out his fan, extended it towards Jin Yang, and said that if they want to drive them away, then let them start with him. Li Qi also told Li Haiyang that he should not cover up someone's intentions just because of his relationship with that person. Li Qi also demanded from Li Haiyang that he be firm and show the whole world the greatness of the laws of his country. Jin Yang looked at Li Qi and thought that he became the chief inspector for a reason, and he believed that if some measures were not taken, then this problem would not only affect him and Li Xiang. Then Li Xiang told Jin Yang that he would no longer be able to tell Li Qi, and he asked Jin Yang to explain on his own why he bought all these iron devices. Then Jin Yang told Li Xiang that he was ready to personally show the purpose of all these iron products with the help of his strength. Then Jin Yang once again told Li Xiang that due to excess yang energy, Sejong's vision had deteriorated, but Jin Yang was confident that if Sejong began to harden his body, he would be able to cope with his illness. Jin Yang also told Li Xiang that Sejong showed virtually no physical activity, and he hoped that over time he would be able to interest Sejong to take up physical training. Jin Yang also hoped that he would be able to convince his father to harden his body if Jin Yang showed strength comparable to that of Xiang Yu, the general of the Jin Empire. Then Jin Yang believed that if he could not convince Li Qi and his soldiers of the correctness of his intentions, then he certainly would not be able to convince his father. After this, Li Xiang told Li Qi and his soldiers that Jin Yang was developing methods for healing the human body, and all his iron devices were needed for training the human body. However, Li Qi still could not believe that all these iron objects, each of which weighed more than the heaviest cauldron, were intended for training. Then Li Xiang believed that it was because of all these iron devices that Li Qi came here with his inspection. Then Li Xiang invited Li Qi to show Jin Yang's strength in order to show them the true purpose of all these iron devices in practice and clear Jin Yang's good name. Then one volunteer came out from the crowd of soldiers and wanted to compete with Jin Yang in strength. The volunteer told Jin Yang that if he lost to him in strength, it would become obvious to everyone that he was lying to everyone. After a couple of minutes, Jin Yang and the volunteer prepared to perform bench presses with the same barbell weight to see which of them would be stronger. Before starting to perform the bench press, Jin Yang explained to the volunteer that this exercise is good for strengthening the arm muscles from the elbow to the hand, chest, and shoulders. However, the volunteer did not take Jin Yang's catch, and he believed that everything depended on the strength of the person. Then Jin Yang began to perform the bench press, and believed that the volunteer was simply afraid that he would be able to defeat the volunteer. Such words made the volunteer even more angry, which only motivated him more to defeat Jin Yang. It was very difficult for the volunteer to hold the barbell, but he could not give up so easily, since now the honor of the chief inspector was at stake. Then the volunteer put in even more effort to be able to lift such a heavy barbell. After a few seconds, the volunteer still managed to lift the barbell for the first time. After this, one of the soldiers who was ensuring the volunteer wanted to see how Jin Yang lifted the same barbell. At this moment, Jin Yang put a little more effort into lifting the same barbell. The volunteer looked at Jin Yang and grinned at the fact that at first Jin Yang pretended to be so strong, but now he couldn't lift the barbell. However, by that time, Jin Yang had already performed the bench press 8 times, and now he is finishing lifting the barbell for the 9th time. Everyone was shocked that Jin Yang managed to perform so many bench presses in such a short time, and Li Qi was the most surprised. After this, the competition ended, and everyone was completely convinced that Jin Yang actually used his iron equipment specifically for training. At this moment, the volunteer felt very ashamed that he could lose so easily in trying to defend the honor of the chief inspector. Then Jin Yang told the volunteer that nutrition and the amount of training depend on the goal. The volunteer was also very surprised when Jin Yang said that thanks to his diet and training system, he was able to lift weight up to 175 kilograms. The volunteer could not believe what he heard, and he believed that the victory over him simply turned Jin Yang's head, after which he left with Li Qi and the rest of the soldiers. Li Qi and his soldiers headed towards the exit, and Li Qi told Jin Yang that this time they would let them go, but he was still under suspicion. Li Qi also told Jin Yang that he would continue to do his duty, and Jin Yang thought that Li Qi was hinting that he would continue to watch over him. Then Jin Yang told Li Qi that in that case he would also watch him and his soldiers. After that, Li Qi finally left, and Jin Yang was glad that this time they managed to avoid a serious conflict. From then on, Li Hyang began to help Jin Yang complete his book, and then Jin Yang felt that along with one problem, he also received a good opportunity. Jin Yang also believed that if everything had gone differently, he would have found himself in a more hopeless situation. After Li Qi left, Jin Yang apologized to his wife and told her that he would now be more careful and discuss all his future plans with her. Jin Yang wanted to say something else to his wife, but suddenly his legs began to give way, causing him to almost fall. However, Jin Yang's wife managed to catch her falling husband and prevent him from falling to the ground. At this moment, everyone, including Jin Yang's wife herself, felt that Mr. Jin Yang was behaving somewhat indecently. After a couple of seconds, Jin Yang was able to get back on his feet, and his wife told him that if he wanted to do this with her, then they should retire to their chambers, after which Jin Yang retired to his wife. That same evening, volunteer Li Qi began to apologize to his captain for failing to defend his honor. Li Qi said that they should not worry about what had already happened, and he told his soldiers that he was able to gain some benefit from what had happened. Li Qi said that among all the metal products of Jin Yang, he was able to notice one interesting thing, which was very similar to a metal tubular weapon. Then Li Qi felt that Jin Yang needed this item for a reason, and Li Qi thought that Jin Yang was going to improve the existing firearms. At last year's hunting competition, Li Qi saw how Jin Yang, without any pity, dealt with one of the prey, like a ferocious and bloodthirsty beast. Li Qi could not believe that the Jin Yang whom he saw then was now busy with issues of improving the health of the human body. That day, Li Qi promised himself that he would personally monitor him in order to later reveal all his true plans. 3 months have passed since then, and one day something happened that Jin Yang could not have expected. That day, Jin Yang was training as usual, and at one point his wife approached him with the news that she was pregnant. Jin Yang couldn't believe what his wife had just told him, and he thought that they had conceived a child that day when they secluded themselves after Li Qi and his soldiers left. At this moment, Jin Yang remembered a moment in his past life when he once again went to a bar with his friend, who told him that he could not go to the gym because he had a 3-year-old son. Then Yongjik told his friend that playing sports could greatly change his life for the better, giving him a powerful surge of strength and vigor after each workout. Then Yongjik's friend asked him if he should listen to advice from a man who had never married in more than 30 years of his life. Then Yongjik jokingly told his friend that he had 2 spouses, which were his barbell and dumbbell. Back then, Jin Yang couldn't believe that one day he would actually become a father. Then Jin Yang picked up his wife and couldn't help but be happy that he would actually become a father. Jin Yang was so happy about this news that he wanted to convey such good news to Sejong as soon as possible. Jin Yang's wife was glad that the news of her pregnancy made her husband so happy. First of all, Jin Yang decided to do some simple exercises with his wife so that he could get a rough idea of how childbirth might go. At first, Jin Yang decided to do some simple stretching with his wife to see if his wife would experience fatigue during childbirth, but this was not enough. Jin Yang remembered that in this era, childbirth could lead to death due to some complications, and then Jin Yang felt that he needed to create a disinfectant in time to reduce the risks of childbirth. Within a few days, Jin Yang was able to create sojut kori, a special container used to store soju, a traditional ancient Korean alcoholic drink. After this, Jin Yang called a local doctor to see him, to whom he wanted to show his invention. Jin Yang showed the doctor that he first pours alcohol into a container, which passes through a special narrow tube that cools the contents in the container. After this, Jin Yong ordered to bring him all the soju that was in the house in order to test the operation of his device in practice. After a while, Jin Yong was able to extract the alcohol he needed from soju, and he wanted to test the purity of the alcohol. In order to check the purity of the alcohol, Jin Yong took out another container, which was 80% filled with water. The specific gravity of pure alcohol must be 0.8%, and Jin Yong could not allow the container with alcohol to be lighter or heavier than the container with water. After several attempts, Jin Yong finally managed to reach a certain level of alcohol purity, which could mean that he could make a disinfectant. A lot of time has passed since Yongjik found himself in the Joseon era, and Yongjik was never able to return back to his time. Every day, Yongjik wondered what happened during the time he was here. However, a few months later, Jinyin's child was born, and from that day on, he became fully immersed in life in Joseon. The first thing Jin Yong decided to do was tell his father the good news that he finally had a child. Upon arrival, Sejong said that Jin Yong had changed a lot in recent months, and that his invention of soap and disinfectant had greatly changed the life of Joseon. Jin Yong told his father that his father's mercy was limitless, but he still had some way to go. However, Sejong told Jin Yong that he should not be modest, and Sejong told Jin Yong that he would give him 200 nyan of silver as compensation for his expenses for creating the soap. Sejong also told Jin Yong that the birth of his son was the blessing of the entire royal family, and Sejong remembered that thanks to Jin Yong's remedy, his wife returned to normal within a week after giving birth. Then Sejong said that from this day forward, Jin Yong's disinfectant should be used in the treatment of newborn children and their mothers after difficult births. At this moment, Sejong looked at Jin Yong and thought that Jin Yong used to be a simple youth, but now he has matured and is benefiting both families and the entire Joseon. Suddenly, Sejong's health deteriorated greatly, making it suddenly difficult for him to breathe. Within seconds, Sejong fell from his throne, and his subjects immediately called doctors to try to bring King Sejong back to his senses as quickly as possible. That same evening, Li Hyang told Jin Yong that their father's condition had worsened, but this time Sejong was still able to come to his senses, but he was still worried about his condition. Li Hyang also told Jin Yong that Sejong was now constantly thirsty, and his eyesight had deteriorated so much that he now had to hold a book right in front of his eyes to read something. Li Hyang also said that doctors are now giving Sejong a special healing decoction, but it does not have any effect. Then Jin Yong asked Li Hyang if his father had told him that he could see flying insects or a whitish fog. In a past life, Yongjik had a grandfather who suffered from diabetes and who had similar symptoms to Sejong, sometimes complaining about seeing insects or cloudy fog. However, Li Hyang told Jin Yong that Sejong did not complain of such symptoms, and he only said that he had difficulty seeing things in the distance. Then Jin Yong told Li Hyang that in this case the situation was not critical, and he believed that now Sejong was simply experiencing a slight malaise, which was caused by ordinary overwork. Then Jin Yong believed that if King Sejong's condition continued to deteriorate, then within a year he would completely lose his sight. Jin Yong also remembered that September would soon come, and his mother's birthday would be celebrated in September, and he thought that this would be an extremely good opportunity to influence his father. Li Hyang believed that Jin Yong was planning to do something grand at the royal feast. Jin Yong told Li Hyang that his book only described 3 exercises using heavy weights. Among these 3 exercises, Jin Yong described the squat, bench press, and deadlift in his book. During a deadlift, Jin Yong should try to lift a barbell with a very heavy weight to waist level. Then Jin Yong calculated that by his mother's birthday, he should reach 400 kilograms in these exercises. Li Hyang was shocked that Jin Yong seriously decided to lift 400 kilograms of weight at his mother's birthday. Li Hyang then told Jin Yong how he had recently asked one of Joseon's most experienced soldiers to lift 600 kilograms. However, a barbell with such weight turned out to be too heavy for the soldier, and he was unable to lift the barbell. Jin Yong said that at the moment he is not able to lift 900 kilograms of weight, and to lift 400 kilograms, he needs to try hard. However, Jin Yong believed that he should put in all his efforts to become strong enough to lift 400 kilograms of weight, and for the sake of his father. Li Hyang then told Jin Yong that he would help him too, and he said that his book described too many things that would be difficult for an ordinary person to understand, and he would try to make his book more understandable. Li Hyang also told Jing Tian that he would try to improve his younger brother in his studies. Jin Yong was afraid that in addition to writing the book, he also had to improve his teaching. Li Hyang reminded Jin Yang that he himself had written about honoring his parents, and Li Hyang said that his book should contain at least 13 sutras, the Confucian precepts of the Ming dynasty. Jin Yang felt that it would be extremely difficult for him to raise the level of his teachings, since the only scriptures he had once read were the 5 classics. However, Jin Yang believed that all this should help his father understand even more the importance of a healthy lifestyle. Jin Yang then told Li Hyang that from that day on, he would not only try to lift 400 kilograms, but also raise the level of his teachings. Then Li Hyang said that he would definitely ensure that their father became interested in Jin Yang's book and understood it. After this, Jin Yang and his brother Li Hyang immediately drank and ate in the name of their father's health. The next day, Jin Yang began to think about how he should prepare to lift 400 kilograms for his mother's birthday. Jin Yang also thought that if he himself did not try to lose all his excess weight, then he would definitely not be able to convince his father to think about leading a healthy lifestyle. Then, before starting his attempts to lift 400 kilograms, Jin Yang decided to first get rid of 8 kilograms of his excess weight. Then Jin Yang believed that in the conditions of this era of smama, an effective way to lose excess weight is to climb a mountain. Jin Yang began to climb the mountain with Li Hyang, who hoped with all his heart that Jin Yang would actually be able to lift 400 kilograms on his mother's birthday. Soon, the Jin Yang finished their climb up the mountain, and he immediately began to raise his level of teachings. Jin Yang began to read a book with various teachings, and he did not understand how he would be able to learn everything that was described in this book. Then Jin Yang remembered Li Hyang's words that he managed to learn all these teachings in 2 weeks. He believed that with such talent, Jin Yang could learn these teachings in a week. In order to lose weight, Jin Yang also changed his diet, replacing it with cabbage, cucumbers, red tofu, and oatmeal. Jin Yang's wife was surprised that her husband would actually eat this and modest foods for a long time. Then Jin Yang told his wife that at his mother's birthday, he was going to show all his respect to her and to his father. Jin Yang also said that if he had less fat in his body, he would be able to achieve this goal even faster. After a couple of seconds, Jin Yang started eating and said that he had everything he needed to achieve his goal. Jin Yang's wife apologized to her husband because she again failed to understand all of his plans. At one point, Jin Yang paused before eating when his wife told him that she had decided to add a little salt to his tofu so that it wouldn't taste too bland. Soon, Jin Yang's wife called the servants over and ordered them to remove all the food from Jin Yang's table and prepare all his food again. Also, Jin Yang's wife ordered the servants to carefully check her husband's food from that day on, so that all of Jin Yang's food would always be fresh. For a long time, Jin Yang continued to train hard, lifting more and more weight every day. Jin Yang also continued to try to lose weight by climbing mountains with Li Hyang, and every day they climbed higher and higher. In between training sessions, Jin Yang also did not forget to increase his level of teachings, memorizing more and more wisdom each time. At one point, Jin Yang and his brother were able to climb to the very top of the mountain that they climbed together every day. Jin Yin looked down at Joseon and thought only that the time he had spent on all this had passed too quickly. Soon the birthday of Sejong's wife arrived, to which a lot of guests came. There were a lot of people at the birthday party who entertained Sejong and his wife in every possible way. Sejong's wife was very pleased with how people could ride horses in such an unusual way. Sejong himself pretended to like everything, but in reality he could not properly see everything that was happening around him. Jin Yang was scheduled to speak last, and he asked Li Hyang if he had discussed his performance with anyone else. Li Hyang told Jin Yang to the crown princess that Jin Yang plans to lift 300 kilograms, which only made the crown princess angry and didn't believe what was said. Then Li Hyang asked Jin Yang to be sure to carry out his plans, and in this case, their mother might also be interested in teaching a healthy lifestyle. Li Hyang also told Jin Young that he was counting on him very much, after which Jin Young went to show the public the capabilities of his body. Soon it was Jin Young's turn to wish his mother a happy birthday. Jin Young bowed his knee in front of his mother and began to congratulate her on her birthday from the bottom of his heart. Jin Young also told his mother that he owes her everything he had before, what he has now, and what he will have in the future. Meanwhile, several subjects tried to hold iron plates in their hands, which they would then have to place on a barbell. Jin Young also told his parents that he would like to demonstrate to them his teachings on a healthy lifestyle, which describe methods for healing and improving the body. Sejong noticed that there was a lot of iron behind Jin Young, and he asked Jin Young what he was going to do with all these iron things. Jin Young told his father that all this was just a small performance that he would like to repay his parents with. After that, Jin Young took off the canvas and told his parents that today he would like to demonstrate to them the capabilities of his body, which they gave him at birth. At this moment, the entire royal guard was shocked by how strong Jin Young seemed. At this moment, Jin Young's servants had already managed to place the required number of iron plates on the barbell. The first thing Jin Young planned to do was bench press, but no one understood what Jin Young wanted to do. At this moment, Jin Young was being observed by Li Qi and his undercover soldiers, and they noticed that the barbell had become several times larger and heavier since their last meeting. Meanwhile, Jin Young had time to prepare to perform a bench press, after which he removed the heavy barbell from the support racks. After a few seconds, Jin Young was able to lift such a heavy barbell almost effortlessly. Everyone who looked at Jin Young was shocked that Jin Young could actually lift such a heavy barbell. After the exercise, Jin Young put the barbell back on the support stands, after which he turned to his parents. Jin Young told his parents that they were now watching the bench press, one of the most important exercises in his book, which allows you to pump and strengthen the muscles of the chest, shoulders, and arms. However, Jin Young's mother told her son that she did not fully understand what she had just seen. After that, Jin Young was asked how much all this iron weighed, and Jin Young said that in total all this iron weighs 280 kilograms. Sejong and his wife were shocked that Jin Young was actually able to lift so much weight. Soon, several more people came to the bar with iron plates for Jin Young's next exercise. After a couple of seconds, Jin Young's servant placed another couple of weights on Jin Young's barbell, which made the barbell begin to weigh even more. Jin Young's next exercise was the barbell squat, during which he must use the strength of his legs to successfully complete the exercise. Jin Young also said that this exercise perfectly pumps and strengthens the muscles of the legs and lower back. Jin Young's mother was afraid that Jin Young was planning to do this exercise with even more weight, and she asked her son to stop. However, Jin Young had already managed to pick up the barbell, and he said that this barbell now weighs 340 kilograms. After that, Jin Young slowly began to squat, which this time turned out to be somewhat harder than the previous exercise. Soon, Jin Young squatted down completely, and all he could do was stand up again with the heavy barbell on his shoulders. After a couple of seconds, Jin Young began to rise up again with a heavy load. As a result, Jin Young was able to perform such a difficult squat again with even heavier weight. Sejong and his wife were shocked that Jin Young also managed to lift such a heavy barbell. After this, Sejong called one of his servants to him and asked him how this was even possible. Then Sejong's servant suggested that it was all thanks to the book Jin Young was writing. At this point, Jin Young said that he would now show the most difficult exercise that is described in his book, namely the deadlift. Jin Young said that during this exercise he would use his heaviest weights, while Jin Young's servants tried to carry the heaviest iron plates to the barbell. Before Jin Young started demonstrating the deadlift, Li Hyang told his father that he was a little worried that Jin Young might hurt his back during this exercise. Then Li Hyang picked up a special belt for deadlifts and said that in this exercise it is necessary to use additional means of protecting the back from sudden injuries. After that, Li Hyang walked over to Jin Young and pulled a special deadlift belt on him. Before doing the deadlift, Jin Young said that the barbell now weighs 400 kilograms. Jin Young also thanked his parents again for giving him such a capable body, and he said that he would continue to take care of it and improve it. At this point, One of Li Qi's soldiers told his captain that, given Jin Yang's standard training, his statements should indicate Jin Yang's lack of sanity. Meanwhile, Jin Yang believed that if he had not been on a diet, then managing such weight would have been somewhat easier. Jin Yang also believed that even with a belt, it would be extremely difficult for him to cope with such weight. Then Jin Yang leaned towards the barbell, grabbed it as tightly as possible, and prepared to demonstrate his deadlift. A second later, Jin Yang concentrated all his strength on the barbell, tensing all his muscles. Jin Yang tried with all his might to lift the heavy barbell off the ground, but in the first seconds, Jin Yang was unable to lift the barbell steadily. After a couple of seconds, Jin Yang still managed to put in more effort and lift the extremely heavy barbell off the ground. Captain Li Qi and his soldiers could not believe that a person was even capable of something so heavy. Even though Jinyan managed to lift the barbell, his arms were under so much tension that they immediately began to bleed. But despite all this monstrous load, Jin Yang was able to hold the barbell in his hands. At one point, Sejong's wife was so shocked by what her son was able to do that she briefly lost consciousness. After a few minutes, Jin Yang placed the barbell on the ground, causing the brick road under the barbell to begin to crumble a little. All the spectators were still in shock that Jin Yang was able to pump up his body so much that he was able to withstand such a huge load on the body. After Jin Yang showed everyone his exercises, Sejong's wife suddenly stood up from her seat. At first, Jin Yang didn't understand what his mother wanted to do, and then she simply walked towards Jin Yang silently. After Jin Yang's mother approached her son, she grabbed his hand to see what had happened to them during his entire training. Jin Yang's mother was deeply touched that her son had gone to such great lengths to show her and Sejong his respect for them. At one point, Jin Yang's mother could not hold back her tears, after which she immediately began to cry. Following Sejong's wife, the girls who served Sejong's wife immediately began to cry, since they had never seen such sincere emotions of Sejong's wife before. At this moment, one of the spectators said that before, he had only heard that people who study martial arts also become as big as Jin Yang's abdominal muscles. Sejong then told Jin Yang that he was truly amazed at how his son was able to strengthen his body so much. Sejong also asked Jin Yang what inspired him to write his book on improving the health of the human body and continue to further develop this idea. Jin Yang said that his parents had given him an extremely amazing body, and so he decided that he should now take good care of his body and continue to develop it. Sejong then asked Jin Yang if lifting 1,000 pounds was necessarily the norm, since he was worried that not everyone could lift something that heavy. However, Jin Yang said that he first started training just to get rid of excess weight, and as he did these exercises, his strength began to increase naturally. Jin Yang also said that thanks to the training, his movements became smoother, and his constant fatigue almost completely disappeared. After that, Sejong told Jin Yang that he would look at the book that Jin Yang wrote with his brother. Sejong also told Jin Yang that he would definitely discuss his book with him after he fully read his book. At this moment, Jin Yang was happy that he finally managed to entice his father into the topic of a healthy lifestyle. Sejong also said that he was somewhat dissatisfied with Jin Yang's current name and said that he would now have a new official name. From that day on, Jin Yang now had a new official name, Grand Prince Su Yang, in which Su meant head. Towards evening, Li Hyang handed the book to his younger brother Zhejiang, who at first thought that Su Yang's book was somewhat extraordinary. Sejong also asked Li Hyang where Su Yang had such knowledge about methods of healing the human body that he was able to write his own book about it. However, Li Hyang told Sejong that he himself was surprised at how detailed and intelligibly Su Yang was able to describe all the training methods in his younger brother's book. Li Hyang also told Sejong that in his book, Su Yang had thought of using something that he called a table, which had not previously been found in any book in all of Joseon, which interested Sejong very much. Sejong started reading Su Yang's book, and it covered all the research on eating habits, exercise, and other healthy lifestyle factors. The book said that if you cook 6 kilograms of rice, it will be enough to feed one adult for 10 days, while children will be fed for 20 days. However, the book described that excessive overeating can lead to several complications in the body, such as excess weight and decreased muscle mass. The book also stated that if you add 1 spoon of sesame oil to a child's daily diet, his body will always be full of strength and energy. However, with such a diet, the child will gain 300 grams of fat per month, after which Sejong looked at his plump body and thought about something. The next day, Li Hyang came to Su-young, and Su-young asked his elder brother what his father said about his book. Li Hyang told Su-young with a smile on his face that his father wanted to learn Su-young's teachings, which made Su-young very happy. The joyful Su-young told Li Hyang that he had already prepared all the supplies necessary for Sejong for his first training. Happy Su-young wanted to start training with Sejong as soon as possible, since he was first going to teach him how to hold the correct position while doing the exercises. However, Li Hyang told Su-young that Sejong was somewhat busy right now and that he would like to discuss things a little later, which surprised Su-young a little. In fact, Sejong simply walked around the territory of the royal estate, regularly asking the servants to bring him Joseon, a Korean toffee diluted in water. Then Su-young decided that if Sejong was not going to come to the training on his own, then Su-young himself would come to him with all the necessary items and his book. After that, Su-young grabbed several rods and ran to the royal estate, and then Li Hyang also wanted to go with his brother. After a while, the royal guards noticed Su-young just kneeling in the middle of the royal court, and they told him that he shouldn't behave like that. However, Su-young said that he was not going to leave so easily, and he told the guards that they could try to drive him away on their own. The guards then tried to lift Su-young and take him away, but they were unable to lift Su-young. Sejong soon arrived at the scene and demanded an explanation of what was happening here. Sejong also began to threaten the guards and Su-young that if something like this happened, he would personally rip the skin off their faces. However, Su-young approached Sejong and told him that they needed to discuss something together. Sejong thought that Su-young wanted to talk to him about his book, and he told Su-young that he had read it and that he wanted to try the exercises a little later. First, Su-young thanked his father for his generosity, after which he said that they should start studying from today and continue studying further. Su-young insisted that Sejong start studying with him now, but Sejong himself firmly insisted that he was busy now and that he would like to start studying later. Sejong also began to suspect that Su-young wrote this book solely because he knew about Sejong's illness. Su-young said that all of Sejong's symptoms had already become extremely noticeable, and he believed that Sejong should recover from it as soon as possible through exercise. Sejong then asked his royal physician what symptoms Su-young was talking about, and the doctor said that Su-young was most likely talking about King Sejong's constant thirst and excessive sweating. Then Su-young believed that Sejong consulted a doctor precisely after his book, since it was after reading it that he began to worry about his health, but he still rejected physical exercise. Then Su-young decided to scare Sejong a little and said that he suspected Sejong of diabetes, and he decided to bring his body to the state of a person who suffers from this serious illness. Then Sejong was very surprised by what Su-young had just told him about diabetes. Su-young told his father his idea so seriously that even Li Hyang for a moment believed Su-young's words that he had conducted such experiments on himself. Diabetes is a serious disease that occurs due to excessive overeating, and high-calorie foods such as sweets or baked goods only contribute to the development of this disease. Su-young drew attention to the fact that Sejong drinks Joseon too often, which is most likely the main cause of diabetes and its further development. The main causes of diabetes are continuous thirst and excessive fatigue, which can cause a person to suddenly fall asleep. Su-young then told Sejong that he was showing all the primary signs of diabetes. In fact, Su-young lied to Sejong a little about how he was trying to get diabetes through training, and at that moment even Li Hyang believed his words. Sejong then asked Su-young how long it would take to completely get rid of diabetes and its symptoms. Su-young told Sejong that it would take 6 months of hard training to get rid of diabetes. Then Sejong said that he would try to do physical exercises, and if there was no change in 6 months, then he would punish Su-young for deceiving the king. Su-young agreed to Sejong's terms, after which they went to train together. First of all, Su-young decided to give Sejong a little warm-up in the form of horse riding. While riding a horse, Sejong found it very difficult to sit with his back straight. Sometimes Sejong began to slouch, and Su-young constantly reminded him to keep his back straight. Sejong could not look at such a stern expression on Su-young's face, because if Sejong leaned over even a little, Then Su-young would immediately show his dissatisfied face and point out to Sejong his mistakes. During this training, Sejong only dreamed of finishing this exercise as quickly as possible. An hour after starting the exercise, Su-young told Sejong that he could finish this exercise, which made Sejong very happy. However, Su-young told Sejong that this exercise was just a small warm-up before the main exercises, which made Sejong very upset. After horse riding, Su-young told Sejong to do barbell squats. It seemed to Sejong that this exercise was even more difficult than riding a horse, which made Su-young look at his father more and more sternly, pointing out his mistakes when performing the exercise. During the barbell squat, Su-young gave Sejong tips on how to properly perform the exercise, such as the required number of repetitions, leg and back position. After a few exercises, it was time for lunch. Sejong was incredibly happy that he would finally be able to eat and regain his strength. For lunch, Sejong was brought rice, oatmeal, tofu, and other foods that Su-young ate during his training. Sejong was very disappointed with his lunch today, as he was already used to eating various delicious dishes every day. The first thing Sejong decided to try was rice, but it seemed to him that the taste of rice was more like horse feed. Then Sejong decided to stop eating what they brought him, after which he called his cook to him. Soon, Sejong's personal chef arrived, and Sejong then began to express his dissatisfaction with him about his food today. Then Sejong demanded that they bring him what they usually cook for him and throw what was now on the table to the horses. Meanwhile, Su-young watched his father from the side and listened as Sejong began to complain about his food today. After a couple of seconds, Su-young looked at Sejong again with his intimidating gaze and asked him why he refused to eat the food that was just brought to him. Sejong was frightened by his son's sudden appearance in the room, and Su-young explained to his father that he himself asked the cook to prepare such food. Su-young also said that in order to control the sugar in the body, he also asked the cook and the rest of the servants to no longer pour jocheon for Sejong, so that it would be easier for Sejong to lose weight. However, Sejong was still dissatisfied with his food, as he thought that these dishes tasted very bad. Then Su-young himself reminded Sejong that he himself had promised to follow his instructions for 6 months. Su-young also recalled one of the Confucian teachings, which said that for a noble man, any promise he makes should be even more valuable than life. Then Su-young showed Sejong all his dissatisfaction with the fact that his father could not follow such a simple thing as a proper diet. Then Sejong calmed down a little and continued to leisurely eat his lunch, while thinking about how Su-young could be so stubborn and expedient. After one of his regular workouts, Sejong went to his bedroom to do some work. However, Sejong was so tired after another training session that his hand was constantly shaking from tension, which made him unable to write on paper normally. Due to the constant tension in his hands, Sejong had already ruined several sheets of paper, but he still tried to write normally. That evening, Sejong thought only that after 2 weeks of hard training, he had not achieved any result. At this moment, Sejong suddenly became hungry, and he ordered his servant to bring him his night meal. However, at this moment, instead of the servant, Su-young arrived to Sejong, who again looked at Sejong with his creepy and cold gaze. Sejong was very frightened by such a sudden appearance of his son, which is why Sejong thought that now he would simply die of fear. Su-young then apologized to his father and told him that he just wanted to check on him and make sure he was okay. A few seconds later, Su-young left Sejong's bedroom, who at that moment thought that now this cold gaze of Su-young would appear in his nightmares. Soon, Sejong decided to go to bed, and he began to somewhat regret that he agreed to these trainings, since because of them he could not normally carry out his government duties. Sejong soon fell asleep, and the guards who stood at the entrance to Sejong's room were very surprised that for the first time in a long time, Sejong stopped snoring in his sleep. At this moment, Sejong had a dream in which he still managed to strengthen his body in the same way as Su-young once did. It's been a month since Sejong started following a healthy lifestyle. One day, Su-young decided to contact Jang Yong-sil, who was an inventor at the royal estate. When Su-young arrived at Chan Young's place, he saw that Chan Young was sleeping right at his workplace. Su-young was also somewhat frightened by the unusual wooden doll that stood on Chan Young's desk. After a couple of seconds, Su-young noticed that Chan Young began to become delirious in his sleep. However, after a second, Chan Young raised his head, looked at his head and continued to rave. Su Yang felt that Chan Young had some mental problems if he was talking to a doll, which made him feel a little awkward watching Chan Young. Meanwhile, Chan Young was still delusional, and his behavior became more and more creepy with each passing second. At one point, Su Yang finally decided to try to talk to Chan Young, who did not expect that there was someone else in the room with him. Then Chan Young apologized to Su Yang for his unpleasant appearance and politely asked Su Yang about what issue Su Yang came to him. From his past life, Su Yang remembered that Chan Young was a true genius of his time, who made invaluable contributions to the life and development of Joseon. At one point, Su Yang felt that the Chan Young he was looking at right now was very different from the Chan Young he had read about in his previous life. Su Yang didn't decide to ignore Chan Young's mental state, and then he told Chan Young that he would like to ask him to make one device for him. Su Yang also handed Chan Young his drawing and said that the emperor himself wanted Chan Young to create this device. However, Su Yang said something wrong, which instantly caused Chan Young to become extremely hysterical. Su Yang didn't understand what he did wrong, while Chan Young continued to scream. Su Yang then asked Chan Young if he knew about his book on living a healthy lifestyle, and then Chan Young said that there are literally no people left in Joseon who don't know about his book. Chan Young also said that he saw with his own eyes how Su Yang lifts a monstrously heavy barbell. Then Su Yang believed that Chan Young was probably aware that Sejong had begun to independently study health promotion techniques, but due to the upcoming cold weather, the king would not be able to train outside. Then Su Yang showed Chan Young his drawing and said that he would like Chan Young to assemble special stilts for Sejong that would simulate a real run. Chan Young said that he had never worked with such structures before, and he told Su Yang that it could take up to several years to create such a device. At this point, Su Yang realized that it would be difficult for Chan Young to design a device similar to a modern treadmill. Su Yang then told Chan Young that when he began to strengthen his body, he also experienced a lot of difficulties and torment. Su Yang also said that every time he tries to imagine Sejong going through the same torment, his heart becomes heavy, and then he said that they should not count on this path yet. At first, Chan Young thought that this device should help strengthen the body, to which Su Yang said that, along with the growth of skills, the weight with which one has to strengthen one's body also increases. Su Yang also said that when he himself was just starting to strengthen his body, he repeatedly felt unpleasant sensations such as pain in his arms, legs, and stomach, and Su Yang was still uncomfortable with these sensations. Then Chan Young considered that using such a treadmill could provoke even more unpleasant sensations. Then Chan Young said that he would like to refuse to create something like that, but if King Sejong and Prince Su Yang himself want this, then he must create this device as soon as possible. At this moment, Chan Young immediately became eager to quickly study Su Yang's drawings, who was surprised that just a minute ago, Chan Young said that it would take several years to create this treadmill. A minute later, Chan Young began to study Su Yang's drawing, thinking about how best to change the design and what materials should be used for this. A couple of minutes later, Chan Young offered Su Yang his version of a device for simulating walking, which was somewhat similar to a wheel for domestic hamsters. Then Su Yang asked Chan Young how many months it takes to create such a structure, and Chan Young said that if you don't focus on unnecessary decorations, it will take no more than 10 days. However, Chan Young still believed that creating this design would require a lot of effort, and then Su Yang said that he was ready to help Chan Young with creating a training wheel. After 10 days, Su Yang and Chan Young were able to create a working training wheel, and the first thing Su Yang wanted to do was demonstrate the new training wheel to Li Hyang. Despite the reliable design, Li Hyang was worried that this wheel was not tested, and he believed that Sejong would be the one to test this wheel first. However, Su Yang told Li Hyang that after assembling the wheels, he decided to test them in practice, and they turned out to be reliable enough to be easy to practice with. However, Li Hyang meant that he believes that this wheel should be tested by someone who has never trained before, so that one can understand whether such people can train in this wheel. Then Su Yang told Li Hyang that he knew just one such person on whom this new simulator could be tested. Li Hyang thought that his younger brother was talking about him, and he told Su Yang that he should no longer joke like that. However, Su Yang, with all the seriousness of his gaze, showed Li Hyang that he was not going to joke, and then Li Hyang tried to explain to Su Yang that he could not endure physical activity consistently. As a result, Su Yang still managed to force Li Hyang to try a new simulator, which was very difficult for Li Hyang to train on. During such a run, it seemed to Li Hyang that he had been running for an hour, but Su Yang said that Li Hyang had only run for 15 minutes, which made Li Hyang very sad. After running in the wheel, Su Yang sent Li Hyang to do the bench press, but Li Hyang himself could not understand why he had to do this exercise. At this moment, Su Yang said that he was somewhat saddened by the fact that his elder brother, who also had a very strong and resilient body, could not put in enough effort. At the moment when Li Hyang was able to perform 12 bench presses, Su Yang ordered him to do 3 more bench presses, which really annoyed Li Hyang, since this was not the first time Su Yang forced him to do the exercise 3 more times. Su Yang said that he first looks at the workload of the muscles, after which he can better understand how many times he needs to do the exercise, to which Li Hyang only said that Su Yang should learn to count. After the bench press, Su Yang told Li Hyang to squat the barbell 8 times, and Li Hyang asked Su Yang if he would also make him do the exercise a few more times. Su Yang told Li Hyang that his calculation method was highly dependent on Li Hyang's muscles, and if he was not adjusted correctly, he would not be able to strengthen his body. During the exercise, Su Yang repeatedly pointed out Li Hyang's incorrect movements during the squat, such as bowed knees or a bent back. At one point, Li Hyang simply could not stand it and cried, asking Su Yang to again become the same kind person as he was before. However, Su Yang said that for the sake of his brother's health, he was ready to become even angrier, and then Su Yang told Li Hyang that from that day on, he would also study his methods of improving health. The next day, Su Yang trained with Sejong, who was running on a wheel. Su Yang was surprised that even though Sejong almost lost his breath at the beginning of the exercise, he still continued to run for more than 15 minutes. Su Yang also noticed that Li Hyang also performed well in training, and he believed that the physical abilities of the royal family were simply amazing, and Chan Young's contribution was simply invaluable. At one point, Chan Young asked Su Yang to tell him a little more about the methods of strengthening the body so that he could improve the simulator in every possible way. Soon, Su Yang told Chan Young some information, and during the conversation, Su Yang realized that despite the fact that Chan Young went down in history as a brilliant inventor, in reality he turned out to be an eccentric. Then Su Yang came to the conclusion that in fact Chan Young was an ordinary workaholic who was very dedicated to his work. Sometime after Sejong began training, some ministers began to suspect that the disease had already overtaken Sejong. Also, some ministers did not like the fact that since Sejong began training with Su Yang, he devoted all his time to training, completely forgetting about government duties. At this moment, Li Hyang was approached by Sejong's doctor, who suspected that King Sejong's diabetes was rapidly developing and that Sejong's body had been severely emaciated over the past 3 months. However, Li Hyang tried to reassure the doctor by telling him that Sejong began to lose weight after Su Yang's training, just like him and Su Yang. Then the doctor reminded Li Hyang that Su Yang himself said that rapid weight loss indicates progressive diabetes. Then the ministers began to be indignant at Su Yang's methods and believed that these methods were not at all effective and that they should urge people to abandon these methods right now. At that moment, King Sejong came out in front of the ministers, who right now wanted to know what these people were arguing about. The ministers could not believe their eyes how King Sejong was able to change so much for the better. Then the ministers told Sejong that it was time for them to go about their business, so as not to accidentally run into a conflict with Sejong. At that moment, Li Hyang approached Su Yang and told him how the ministers began to think that Sejong's illness was continuing to develop due to his training. However, Su Yang told Li Hyang that they had nothing to worry about, and that Sejong's medical records showed excessive sweating with minimal fluid intake. The doctor wanted to tell Su Yang that all the signs had already begun to appear, to which Su Yang said that only 3 months had passed, and that they needed another 3 months to finally be sure of everything. Soon, severe frosts began in Joseon, during which a lot of snow began to fall on the ground. Su Yang looked at the sky and thought only that with every day he lived, His past life seemed more and more like a dream to him. At this moment, Inspector Li Qi approached Su Yang, who wanted to talk to Su Yang personally. The inspector, with a good-natured expression on his face, pointed out to Su Yang that he had arrived at the estate very early. In response, Su Yang also decided to ask Li Qi why he also decided to come to the estate at such an early hour. Li Qi told Su Yang that Sejong has been unable to fulfill many government obligations recently due to excessive fatigue, and he wants to help him with his duties. Then Su Yang expressed his admiration that Li Qi also wants to preserve the strength of Sejong's body and spirit. Su Yang also decided to ask Li Qi whether he was going to start strengthening his body after all. However, Li Qi said that he has too little time to take care of his health, and he said that he cannot spend this time on his own physical and spiritual well-being. Su Yang said that he did not know the duties of the chief inspector, but he believed that it was quite possible for Li Qi to spend at least 1 hour a day strengthening his body and devote the rest of the time to his work and responsibilities. However, Li Qi said that even 1 hour can greatly affect the government structure and that he does not want to take that much risk. After a short silence, Li Qi told Su Yang that he simply wished the best for his king and that he was doing everything in his power to achieve it. After that, Li Qi turned back and went to the exit from the royal estate, telling Su Yang that the same 6 months for which Su Yang promised to help the king would soon pass. Soon the winter frosts passed, and one spring day, Li Qi gathered all his subordinates in the inspector's department. The inspector department worked in such a way that they could make accusations without any evidence, based only on various rumors. All inspectors considered their department's main goal to keep everyone following the basic principles and rules of Joseon, as well as to keep all royal officials at bay. This time, the inspector's department met to discuss their further actions before the start of the royal hunt tomorrow. After a meeting at the inspector's department, Li Qi and her subordinates went to the royal estate to personally talk with the king about leading a healthy lifestyle. At this time, Sejong was just at his daily training, and Li Qi and his subordinates asked Sejong to stop practicing health promotion techniques. Li Qi told Sejong that he was very worried that after Sejong began studying methods to improve his health, government issues still remained unresolved. Sejong then told Li Qi that he had never neglected his royal duties, to which Li Qi said that the king should always set the right example for his officials. Li Qi also argued that Sejong should never put state matters on the back burner, and he wanted Sejong to give up on little things like improving his health. In response to such rudeness, Sejong told Li Qi that his principles were already more like a challenge to the king than loyalty. In response, Sejong said that the real reason for his training is to try to keep himself in good shape to set an example for everyone in the royal hunt. Then Li Qi said that this was too huge a risk, since this year the royal hunt was established by Taizhou, the king of Gangwon province. At this point, Li Qi's subordinates argued that these competitions could be dangerous, since it was very difficult for inexperienced riders to learn to confidently shoot a bow while galloping. In response to this, Sejong said that if a person constantly worries about his question, then he will not be able to learn anything new and will not be able to achieve any success. Sejong also said that until then, he will continue to train to set an example for all participants in the upcoming royal hunt. Finally, Sejong told Li Qi that he too should think about his training, after which Li Qi and his subordinates simply left the territory of the royal estate. The next day, Sejong and Su Yang went on a royal hunt, which took place in Cheerwon, one of the cities in Gangwon province. Before the start of the royal hunt, Sejong informed his hunters that this year he himself would lead the hunt. Sejong also told his hunters that in order to win this royal hunt, they all must stick together and act as one. At this moment, the royal inspectors could not believe that for the first time in many years, King Sejong himself was taking part in a royal hunt. During the last royal hunt, Sejong had such difficulty moving on his own that his subjects had to use a special stretcher for the king. After some time, the start of the royal hunt was announced, and Sejong was very pleased to ride a horse again. While riding the horse, Sejong began to realize why King Taizhou strongly recommended that Sejong take up horse riding. At this moment, Su Yang looked at his father and did not imagine that one day he would ride horses with him. At one point, Sejong turned his attention to the boar, and he was shocked that he could now clearly see into the distance. Meanwhile, a couple of royal inspectors were discussing that the king had decided not to hunt with Li Qi this time, since Sejong wanted to catch his prey on his own this time. At that moment, Li Qi was watching Su Yang and trying to understand why and how he was hiding his true plans so subtly. Li Qi also thought about the fact that, in essence, the royal hunt is a kind of preparation for a war in which almost anything can happen. At this moment, Li Qi took out his bow to quickly get rid of Su Yang while there were no witnesses nearby. However, at that moment, the hunters reported that Sejong had managed to catch a wild boar, and then Su Yang immediately went to his father. Satisfied, Sejong looked at the dead boar carcass and could not believe that he himself was able to catch his prey. Then Sejong decided to get off his horse to get a better look at his prey. At this point, Su Yang arrived and wanted to make sure his father was okay. However, in response to Su Yang's questions about King Sejong's condition, Sejong only remained silent for a moment, after which Sejong immediately began to laugh loudly. Afterwards, Sejong told Su Yang that he was finally able to realize the beauty of horse riding and archery after he was able to hit a target with a bow for the first time in his life. At this moment, Li Qi was still standing on the cliff where Su Yang had stood a couple of minutes ago, and he was angry that he had failed to get rid of Su Yang once and for all. Then Li Qi had to put away his arrow, since he understood that he would definitely not be able to implement his plan to get rid of Su Yang. At this moment, Sejong thanked Su Yang for writing such an outstanding book on strengthening the body. After that, Sejong looked at Li Qi's subordinates and told them that now it was their turn to start training, and all the subordinates said that they would definitely work on themselves. The day after the royal hunt, Chan Young presented Su Yang with the lat pull-down machine that Su Yang asked him to make. Su Yang was very happy about the appearance of the new exercise machine, and he immediately prepared to perform new exercises. After that, Su Yang sat down at the simulator and began to pull the crossbar of the simulator down to check the reliability of the structure. After a few repetitions, Chan Young asked Su Yang if he was satisfied with the new exercise machine. Su Yang then apologized to Chan Young for being distracted from the conversation, and he told Chan Young that this machine was just perfect for pumping up his back muscles. Chan Young then told Su Yang that he had learned a lot of information during the creation, and he was able to understand the method of using the movable pulley, the wheel that gives movement to the drive belt. At this moment, Su Yang was somewhat surprised that Chan Young learned pulley technology for the first time, as he believed that this technology was very common in this era. Chan Young also said that he also tried to use the new exercise machine, but he severely injured his arm, and he was worried about what kind of torment Sejong would have to endure. After this, Su Yang asked Chan Young to also build a leg flexion and extension machine. Chan Young calmly told Su Yang that it would not be difficult for him to create such a simulator, and he promised to create this simulator in a month. Su Yang looked at the new simulator and thought that Chan Young was working very hard for the king, and he told him that when he created the new simulator, he would ask Sejong to give Chan Young a vacation. However, Chan Young was categorically against the vacation, and he said that he was able to reach great heights thanks to the king, and he cannot just relax and enjoy life. Chan Young said that he is happy to see people like the king exercise and become healthy and happy. Chan Young also thought that with the new simulator, the king would experience even more pain, as a result of which the king would develop and strengthen his body even more effectively. Su Yang believed that something was definitely wrong with Chan Young, and he believed that he definitely needed a vacation. After some time, Li Qi's subjects, trained by Suya and Sejong, arrived at the royal estate. The inspectors tried their best to do all the exercises that Su Yang and Sejong told them to do. However, due to such exercises, they began to get tired very quickly. Sejong also trained with the inspectors, and he felt that they were not trying at all, which made him think that they wanted to break their promise. But the inspectors said that they would keep their promise. At the same time, the inspectors looked at Su Yang and asked him to persuade the king to stop for a while. However, Su Yang only looked at the exhausted inspectors with a wide smile on his face and told them that he would never dare to stop the king from doing anything. Then the inspectors believed that these exercises were Su Yang's revenge for the incident when they suddenly burst into the estate. During a warm-up run, one of the inspectors accidentally tripped over one of the dumbbells, causing him to fall to the ground, and his comrades wanted to know if he was okay. Then the fallen inspector told his comrades that they urgently needed to continue running after Sejong. At this moment, Su-young did not take any action to help the inspectors in any way, and he simply continued to watch the inspectors suffer. Su-young also enjoyed the sound of the inspectors barely breathing, and he believed that this particular sound was a sign that very soon, Joseon would become even better. A week after the royal hunt, Li Qi announced that very soon he would have to leave Joseon for a short time and go to Hamgyongdo. Some of the inspectors believed that soon unknowing people would begin to gossip that Sejong had demoted Captain Li Qi in rank and sent him into exile. However, Li Qi reminded that he is already 50 years old and that he is unlikely to make any new decisions. Li Qi admitted that he was pleasantly surprised by how Sejong's condition and health improved thanks to exercise. Li Qi also noticed that lately Prince Su-young had also changed and became a completely different person. Li Qi said that although he had distanced himself from the royal court, he was greatly worried about the activities of the Tunguska tribe, and he should go to Hamgyongdo as a provincial governor. Li Qi also asked to tell Su-young to be careful with Saragama, the Ministry of Supervision of the Ming Dynasty. Li Qi learned that the head of Saragama recently ordered a batch of hundreds of bars of soap, and this soap suddenly ended up completely in the hands of Wang Jin, the head of Saragama. There were rumors about Wang Jin that in fact Wang Jin was a person who had a powerful evil spirit hidden in his soul and body. At this moment, Wang Jin looked at the soap and promised himself that sooner or later he would be able to get closer to Su-young. In the era where Jik Young lived, a special report began one evening which stated that such a historically important person as Su-young was actually a time traveler. The evening news reported how, last Chuseok, a traditional Korean holiday, one guy deadlifted 20 kilograms more than last year. The reporter said that the main reason why everyone in Korea was so strong was Su-young, who developed such an interesting traditional game as deadlift. The reporter also said that it was Su-young who invented soap, from which it could be concluded that Su-young was a time traveler. Lee Dong-won, director of the History Museum, believed that Su-young had the physique of a modern bodybuilder and was so talented that it would seem that Su-young was a time traveler. Li Dong also said that over time, Su-young has become more negligent and lazy, which makes Su-young's personality subject to a lot of criticism from historical experts. Li Dong also said that if Su-young's book on methods of strengthening the body had become more significant, then Su-young would have gone down in history as a significant person and not as an author of simple entertainment. However, all this turned out to be just a nightmare from which Su-young suddenly woke up. Li Hyang was very concerned about Su-young's condition, and he was interested to know what was so terrible about Su-young's dream that he woke up so quickly with loud screams. Su-young only thought that his nightmare was too plausible, but there was still no way he could become some kind of time traveler. Then Su-young looked at the large pile and believed that if he didn't put in enough effort, he would actually go down in history as the author of entertainment for traditional holidays. However, Su-young felt that he could not spend so much time on books, and he decided that tomorrow he would create a new writing system. At that moment, Su-young remembered how Sejong suggested that he make a joint effort to bring as much benefit as possible to Joseon and its people. Sejong also remembered that Sejong knew Sanskrit, and Sejong believed that Su-young could help him write the Hongminjeongeum that Sejong wrote. At that moment, Su-young began to remember all the things he had to do, and now he began to understand how Chan-young was feeling right now. Due to his constant work, Su-young was also unable to spend quality time with his wife and his child, as he only came home late at night, after which he would sleep for several hours and then leave again for errands. At this moment, Li Hyang noticed how often Su-young began to sigh, reminding him of Chan-young. Then Li Hyang reminded Su-young that he wanted to appoint someone as the head coach, and he suggested that Su-young take on his student. Then Su-young immediately remembered Ma Il-leung, who was a commoner who could not achieve the highest government position even with his extraordinary abilities. Despite such a good candidate, Su-young also wanted to appoint people from several classes to the positions of head coaches. Previously, Li Hyang believed that in a healthy lifestyle, A person should have a desire to respect his parents, but Su Yang also believed that high-ranking people were also needed here. Su Yang believed that in order to train people on the royal estate, the position of head trainer should be filled by one of Sejong's relatives. Su Yang thought that his cousin Seo Sang-gun could be cast in this role, but he also needed to somehow entice him. Sang-gong was the son of the former King Yang Nung, who was overthrown for adultery in secret from the royal family and for committing corruption, after which Sejong became king. There are also rumors in Joseon that Sang-gun was not much different from his father, and Su Yang believed that Sang-gun could very well become a bad person like his father. The next day, Su Yang was still able to personally meet with Sang-gong, who did not stand out in any way. Su Yang believed that his cousin had gone mad after his father subjected his concubine to cruel trials. However, now Sang-gun looks like a completely normal and calm person, and Su Yang believed that this event simply had not happened yet. Su Yang asked Sang-gong if he knew about his book on healthy living, and Sang-gong said that he was aware that Su Yang was able to open a new scientific field. Then Su Yang invited Sang-gun to become his student, to learn all the secrets of a healthy lifestyle, and Sang-gun immediately agreed with this proposal. Su Yang was then happy that Sang-gong agreed to train with him, and he told Ma Yil that he would train him. Ma Yil approached Sang-gun and told him that they first needed to warm up on a wooden block, after which they could begin the main exercises. However, at this moment, Sang-gun immediately began to insult Ma Yil, telling him that he stinks very much afterward. Su Yang and Ma Yil were amazed at such a sudden change in Sang-gong's behavior, and Sang-gong asked Su Yang how he could even have such an illegitimate and low-born commoner like Ma Yil in his circle. Ma Yil was a little confused about why Sang-gong suddenly became rude, and then Ma Yil didn't pay attention to Sang-gong's words, and he simply told him to go train. After a few minutes, Sang-gun began to try to squat with a barbell, but after a couple of minutes he began to get very tired. Then Su Yang drew Sang-gong's attention to Ma Yil, who could easily withstand a lot of weight, while Sang-gong couldn't even handle 60 pounds. At this point, Sang-gong began to beg Su Yang to do the exercises with lighter weights. After a couple of seconds, Sang-gong, exhausted, simply fell to his knees in front of Su Yang and Ma Yil. At this moment, Su Yang asked Sang-gong why he treated Ma Yil like that if people had treated him so rudely before. Su Yang also said that everyone used to treat Ma Yil the same way because he was an illegitimate son, and Su Yang didn't understand why Sang-gong was acting the same way people treated him before. Sang-gun said that if he had not done this, he would have started to feel so humiliated that he simply would not have wanted to live anymore. Sang-gun said that his older and younger brother were better than him in everything, and because of this, Sang-gun had no chance to conduct government affairs. Sang-gun was also constantly surrounded by people who were afraid that he might pose some kind of threat to the royal throne. Sang-gun said that he was very upset by his powerlessness, which only made him more anxious about his unsuccessful attempts to change something in his life. Su Yang then told Sang-gong that in any case, he should not behave as basely as those who offended him, since he believed that oppressing a noble was the worst thing for any commoner. Then Sang-gun said that he was very ashamed of that and promised that he would not behave like that again. At this moment, Su Yang and Ma Yil were glad that Sang-gong realized everything, since this could have a positive impact on Sang-gong's future. Su Yang then told Sang-gong that Ma Yil should teach him the 3 basic exercises. Su Yang also told Sang-gong that if he could lift 650 pounds in each of the 3 exercises, then he would make him responsible for a healthy lifestyle in the royal palace. Sang-gun couldn't believe that Su Yang could put him in such a position, and Su Yang reminded Sang-gun that Sejong had personally verified the effectiveness of his training. Su Yang said that now anyone who wants to become part of the royal palace must definitely know everything about a healthy lifestyle, and the coach will have to control it. Su Yang also said that if Sang-gong becomes the head coach in the royal palace, then he will train Prince Li Haiyang. That is, Sang-gong will also become the personal trainer of the future king. Su Yang also thought that if Sang-gong achieved such an important position in the royal palace, then no one would mock and humiliate him anymore. Sang-gong could not believe that he would become part of the royal court, and he was somewhat ashamed that he could not even master the 30 books. Then Su Yang and Ma Il told Sang Gong that he didn't have to worry about it, since they promised him that they would definitely help him, since Su Yang was going to create his own letter system. Soon, a new letter system, Hongminjomeun, emerged because Korean speech was very different from Chinese speech, and Joseon residents could not use the Chinese script. Previously, illiterate people could not put their thoughts and problems on paper through writing, but with the advent of the new letter system, anyone could master writing. Years passed, and over time, Su Yang's little son, Hyun-don, grew up. One day, little Hyun-don came to his father to show him how easily and deftly he could lift a cat to show Su Yang his strength. After that, Su Yang picked up Hyun-don, and the little boy asked Su Yang why Uncle Jung-ho falls to the ground after every practice. Su Yang told his son that in order to become stronger, Uncle Jung-ho and Sang-gun train every day, and if their muscles start to hurt, then over time they become bigger and stronger. After that, Su Yang and his son approached Sang-gun, and Hyun-don noticed that Sang-gun always sits or lies down after training. However, Sang-gun said that it was hard for him to train because everyone around him was practicing longer than him, and he told Hyun-dong to start learning new sciences as early as possible. Then Hyun-don took out his father's book on a healthy lifestyle and believed that Sang-gun was talking about it. Sang-gun was amazed that little Hyun-don managed to learn to read and write, and then Hyun-don invited Sang-gun to read his father's book together. Su Yang thought about the fact that he had been in this era for 5 years already, and during this time a lot of sports equipment, such as various barbells, dumbbells, and weights, had already appeared in Joseon. A lot of time has already passed since Su Yang found himself in the Joseon era, and every day his past life seemed to him like a distant dream. Soon, the palace began to show more and more interest in a healthy lifestyle, and even Su Yang's wife began to train and strengthen her body with various exercises. During another training session, Su Yang's wife finally managed to lift the dumbbells on her own. However, at one point, Su Yang's wife felt unwell, causing her to suddenly lose consciousness and begin to fall. But Su Yang managed to catch his wife and prevent any damage from the fall from occurring. After a couple of seconds, Su Yang's wife was able to regain consciousness, and she told Su Yang that she began to feel dizzy, after which her vision darkened and she had a little difficulty breathing. Also, Su Yang's wife complained that she was starting to feel a little nauseous, which scared Su Yang's wife's servants and Ma Yil a little. Su Yang then told his wife that these were only temporary symptoms caused by the sudden flow of blood from the head, and he told his wife to take a deep breath. At this moment, Su Yang was thinking that he was lucky to have his wife by his side, and that he was able to save her from more serious injuries that could have occurred after the fall. Su Yang also thought that as the number of people who began to practice exercises grew, the number of such cases would only increase, and he had to figure out how to reduce such cases to a minimum. During another training session, Sang-gun told Su Yang that he would like to introduce him to one person. Sang-gun said that he would like to introduce Su Yang to Hyun Ji-wyu, who once passed the exams and became an officer in Tonemum, one of the 8 great gates of Seoul. One day, Hyun Shu heard that Su Yang was able to lift 150 pounds, and Hyun Ji-wyu wanted to repeat this exercise by lifting a stone of the same weight, and he managed to do it. However, after a while, Hyun Kyu was fired from his position because after this exercise he severely injured his back, which made him unable to properly straighten his back. At one point it seemed to Su Yang that he had once heard about this man somewhere, and he remembered how this man was able to suppress an entire uprising. Su Yang believed that he still managed to somehow change the course of history, since Hyun Kyu was supposed to retire only after receiving the highest rank, and soon after that he was seriously wounded. Sang-gun then told Su Yang that he had made a strong impression on Hyun Ji-wyu, and Sang-gun felt that Su Yang shouldn't ignore the potential of a talented person like Hyun Ji-wyu. Su Yang was interested in this story and thought that he should really look at Hyun Kyu to understand his true potential. Meanwhile, Hyun Kyu was sitting at home, drinking and blaming Su Yang for what happened to him. Also Hyun Kyu that it was Su Yang who made him look so bad in front of people. Then one of Hyun Kyu's friends said that the king himself had gone through the path of Su Yang's teachings, which once again proved the real effectiveness of these trainings. At that moment, Hyog Ji-Yu promised himself that he would definitely find out in person from Su-Yang whether he really managed to lift the weight of 250 pounds. At this moment, Su-Yang was already standing behind Hyun Ji-Yu, who continued to desecrate Su-Yang and his method of strengthening the body and leading a healthy lifestyle. At one point, Su-Yang finally decided to interrupt Hyun Ji-Yu and tell him that in fact, he could only lift 150 pounds that time. Hyun Kyu was very frightened by the sudden appearance of Su-Yang, who had a small conversation with Hyun Kyu. At this point, Su-Yang was able to get a better look at Hyun Ji-Yu, and he believed that after the injury, Hyun Ji-Yu began to neglect meals, which caused him to gain weight. Despite the fact that Hyun Kyu gained weight, there was a rumor about Hyun Kyu that even after his back injury, he still continued to enjoy horse riding. After this, Su-Yang told Hyun Ji-Yu that because he continued to train, his condition had worsened somewhat, and Hyun Ji-Yu believed that he would not be able to recover. Su-Yang said that there was a method that could cure Hyun Ji-Yu, but there was no guarantee that this method could completely cure Hyun Ji-Yu, and he only had to trust Su-Yang and listen to him. First, Su-Yang showed Hyun Kyu how to do lunges that stretched the motor muscles and joints. Su-Yang also showed Hyun Kyu how to do the Mackenzie exercise, which also strengthens and warms up most of all muscles. At first, Hyun Kyu did not understand how these movement exercises could help him with his illness, and Su-Yang decided to immediately tell Hyun Kyu about his treatment method. Su-Yang told Hyun Ji-Yu that he would not be able to lift heavy weights, and even though he would feel better after these exercises, his back pain started a year ago, which would not be completely cured. Hyun Kyu could not believe that he would not be able to completely heal his back, and he believed that now he would not be able to fulfill his duty as a man, which would make him unable to even look his wife in the eyes. After Hyun Kyu mentioned his wife, Su-Yang recalled a recent incident where his wife fainted while exercising. Su-Yang then told Hyun Ji-Yu that under such circumstances, Hyun Ji-Yu could look for ways to treat such diseases. Hyun Kyu believed that Su-Yang wanted him to become a doctor, which he was very afraid of since he had never read any medical books. Su-Yang told Hyun Ji-Yu that even doctors cannot know all the intricacies of the structure of human muscles and bones, and therefore a doctor who will deal with rehabilitation therapy, who knows about the connection between muscles and skeleton, is needed. Then Hyun Kyu told Su-Yang that he is a very deep thinker, and he told Su-Yang that now, if anyone speaks badly about Su-Yang, he will personally punish such people. Soon, Hyun Kyu began training with Su-Yang, and with each passing day, the number of people who wanted to start training and strengthening their bodies grew more and more. Su-Yang believed that with the advent of the new language system, more and more people could learn to read, which made his book very popular, and at this rate, all people would practice on the street. At this moment, Su-Yang began to think that he needed to design such sportswear so that even poor people could afford such clothes. After another training session, Su-Yang and his wife went to the royal tailor, who made them special training clothes from cheap cotton fabric. However, at first, Su-Yang's wife was somewhat displeased with the fact that these clothes were made of cotton, since she believed that cotton clothes were worn only by ordinary people. Then Su-Yang decided to try on new clothes so that his wife would appreciate the new clothes. It was the first time Su-Yang's wife had seen such clothes, and Su-Yang said that these clothes were specially designed for training. Su-Yang also told his wife that he specifically chose cotton for these clothes because it is not only cheap, but also comfortable. Su-Yang also told his wife that he was well aware that nobles were unlikely to wear such clothes because of the fabric. However, Su-Yang's wife said that she was a little hasty with her conclusions, and she agreed that these clothes should be good for training. Su-Yang was glad that his wife approved of such clothes, and then Su-Yang asked the tailor to take these clothes as a sample and begin mass production of these clothes. Soon, mass production of sports t-shirts began, which consisted of cheap materials, which is why even ordinary people could afford such clothes. One evening, several young men spent time at Chingwangsa Temple, where they studied Su-Yang's book together. Shin Suk-chu, one of the scholars of Jipyeongjong, noticed that Mei Ju-xuan, who was also a scholar of Jipyeongjong, had been studying Su-Yang's book a lot lately. At this moment, Meiju began to feel tired, and he did not even notice how quickly time passed while he studied Su Yang's book. At this moment, Xingqiu wanted to ask Meiju why he suddenly started spending so much time studying. Meiju then told Xingqiu that he could not sit idly by while Su Yang set such an example for them through his book. At this moment, Xingqiu noticed Su Yang's book on healthy living in Meiju's hands, and he said that he had read a little about this book and really liked its contents. Meiju also turned his attention to how Tangja repeated the push-ups he learned about from Su Yang's book. Meiju said that he noticed Tangja suddenly disappear and return early in the morning, and he believed that Tangja was going for a run in the mountainous area. Tangja said that he would like to run up the mountain, but Samgaksan Mountain was too steep for jogging, and Xingqiu suggested that Tangja jump rope to warm up his body and get rid of unnecessary thoughts. Xingqiu also told Tangja that Su Yang's book did not seem that good to him, and despite the fact that it described ways to strengthen the body, most of the information was taken from other manuals. Then Tangja told Xingqiu that he should not take the book so lightly that the king himself praised it. Meiju wanted to prevent further disputes between Tang and Xingqiu, and then he suggested that they discuss this topic in more detail tomorrow. The next morning, Tangja, Meiju, and Xingqiu with several other scholars gathered at the temple again, and Meiju asked Tangja to give his opinion on Su Yang's book, since he had read the most books. Tang said that the book showed many ways to strengthen the human body, but there was no clear description of developing an understanding of the essence of these exercises. Xingqiu said that usually religious books contain the thoughts of true sages, and he doubted that Su Yang was one of those sages. Meiju also asked Tangji how cultivating one's body allows one to show respect for one's parents, if one's respect for one's parents should be shown in one's reputation. Also, Meiju learned from the book that developing his body allows him to survive any heat and cold, but Meiju himself was not entirely sure of the correctness of this idea. Xingqiu said that he is somewhat concerned about the fact that many exercises require a person to use a lot of different expensive equipment. Xingqiu also asked Tangja how many people were able to change for the better thanks to the exercises described in Su Yang's book. To dispel all doubts of Meiju and Xingqiu as much as possible, Tangja cited King Sejong himself as an example of change. Tangja then believed that Meiju and Xingqiu were trying to belittle the king and his achievements in developing his body, but Meiju and Xingqiu immediately began to refute this theory. Tangja said that from the moment Sejong began studying Su Yang's book, he became a completely different person, and even Joseon ministers believed that the king became even more active than in his youth. Tang also said that despite the fact that the book had its shortcomings, the body is still transformed, and even if they start training as well, they will still be able to walk normally the next day. After Tangja's words, Meiju believed that Tangja was suggesting that they buy the same expensive exercise equipment to start training their muscles. However, Tang said that even though they won't be able to afford such expensive machines, they can still use nearby tools of the same weight, such as rocks or logs. Tang also told his comrades that if they were not going to start training their muscles, then no one would force them to do it. After this conversation, Meiju and Xingqiu began training for a whole week. However, on the 8th day, Meiju, Xingqiu, and several other scientists began to complain of extreme fatigue, which is why everyone decided to stop their training. At this point, only Tangja remained, who was somewhat surprised at how quickly his comrades surrendered. Then Tang believed that his comrades simply did not have enough patience, and then he was the only one who did not give up and decided to continue training hard. About a month later, Chan Young created new shoulder press and seated row machines for Su Yang. First of all, Su Yang decided to test the new simulators in practice, and for this he called a couple of inspectors. However, at this moment, Chan Young was not listening to Su Yang, and he was only thinking about how difficult it would be for the inspectors to exercise if he added more weight to these machines. At this point, Su Yang continued to praise Chan Young, to which Chan Young said that a loyal subject like him is simply obliged to work as hard as he can for the good of the king. After some time, Chan Young noticed that the inspectors were still exhausted after testing the new simulators for strength. At that moment, Li Hyung came to Su-young to tell his brother that the simulators were working perfectly. The moment Li Hyung arrived, the inspectors immediately began to pay their respects to him. Even after Li Hyung sat down at one of the simulators, the inspectors still continued to bow to Li Hyung. However, the weight of the simulator turned out to be too much for Li Hyung, and he said that he would punish these inspectors right now for choosing to mock Li Hyung in this way. Then Su-young thought about how Li Hyung would react when he found out that it was Su-young who put such weight on the simulator to test the physical abilities of his older brother. After that, Su-young sent Li Hyung to perform a bench press with a barbell. Soon, Li Hyung still managed to perform the bench press as many times as Su-young told him. After the exercise, Su-young congratulated Li Hyung for finally being able to lift 500 pounds. Li Hyung was flattered by such praise from Su-young, and he believed that after just a year and a half of hard training, he would be able to lift 700 pounds. However, Su-young told Li Hyung that each person's muscles grow differently, and gradually Su-young increased the weight of his barbell to 800 pounds. Su-young also said that after he started lifting 800 pounds, his muscles began to grow much more slowly. Su-young believed that even though he and his brother had equally strong muscles, due to Li Hyung training less, it would take him 2 to 5 years to be able to lift 700 pounds. However, Su-young believed that it did not matter how much time it took him, because it was important for him that Li Hyung did not go astray, and then he ordered Li Hyung to repeat the bench press one more time. The next day, Su-young's wife was not feeling well, and Su-young wanted to know what happened to his wife. However, Su-young's wife said that her food poisoning and nausea had gotten a little worse, making her feel a little worse, so she asked Su-young to get her some meat that Su-young didn't eat. Su-young considered that his wife was telling him about pork meat, and he said that because of his proper meat diet, he only eats chicken and lean beef. However, within a second, Su-young left his wife's room and told her that he would get the best pork for her. A few minutes later, Su-young arrived at the farm, and he asked the farmer to bring him the best pig, and then the farmer showed Su-young the biggest pig on the farm. However, Su-young saw in front of him a cute little pig, which in size was more reminiscent of a baby pig. Su-young looked at this pig and thought that the farmer decided to play a trick on him, but the farmer swore that this pig was the largest on the entire farm. Soon, Kim Jong-so, one of the best warriors of Joseon, arrived at Sejong, who wanted to tell Sejong the news that he had managed to defeat the northern barbarians. Sejong told Kim Jong that he had come a long and hard way, and that with the coming of winter, it would be more difficult for the northern savages to reach the borders of Joseon. Kim Jong paid his respects to Sejong, after which the king hosted a small private banquet to celebrate Kim Jong's return. A few minutes later, the servants set the table especially for Kim Jong, and Su-young invited Kim Jong to drink to the king. While Su-young was pouring Kim Jong a drink, Kim Jong told Su-young that he had heard about how Su-young was able to strengthen his body, and he said that Su-young could now rival the Joseon general himself. Su-young was pleased to hear such compliments from Kim Jong addressed to him, and he said that he did not build muscles in order to shoot a bow or swing a sword. However, Kim Jong told Su-young that he was sending something more valuable than bows and arrows to the north, but Su-young did not understand what exactly Kim Jong was telling him. Kim Jong then explained that he was talking about the alcohol that was sent to him and his army. Kim Jong also said that it was thanks to alcohol that he was able to reduce the number of people in his squad who would suffer from rotting wounds. Then Su-young realized why there was still no rust in his distillation apparatus, which indicated that his invention was now being used everywhere. However, Kim Jong also said that this alcohol had a downside, and soldiers often drank bottles of alcohol to prevent the occurrence and development of colds. For this reason, many problems arose in the detachment due to the fact that sometimes some soldiers were intoxicated. Then Su-young became interested in how Kim Chen was able to solve the problem with drunken soldiers, and then Kim Chen told a very effective and funny way to wean soldiers from drinking alcohol. Kim Jong said that they started adding motherwort to alcohol, and if the soldiers tried to drink even a little alcohol, they would immediately spit out all the alcohol, which made Su-young and Kim Jong laugh very much. Suddenly, Lee Ji-nok walked past Su-young and Kim Jong invited him to join them and have a drink together. Su Yung heard a familiar name, and he remembered that Li Ji Nok was also considered one of the strongest warriors of Joseon, who performed well during the battle with the northern savages. At this point, Li Ji stopped and told Kim Jong that he was simply serving the king and following his will. Then Kim Jong decided to go about his business, leaving Su Yung and Li Ji alone, hoping that two strong people would certainly find a common topic for conversation. While walking, Li Ji told Su Yung that he came here to carry out Sejong's orders and learn a new writing and alphabetic system. At this point, Su Yung decided to try to study Li Ji's physique, and for the first time in Joseon, Su Yung saw a person with a body as strong and toned as his. Su Yung also remembered that at the time when he became the new ruler and began the cleansing, Li Ji would try to gather an army from the Juran tribe. However, at the most unexpected moment, the generals will stab Li Ji in the back, which will greatly weaken the Joseon army, making Li Ji one of the most powerful individuals in Korean history. Su Yung also thought that if Li Ji did survive during historical events, then Su Yung would have to get rid of Li Ji on his own. Such thoughts made Su Yung very uncomfortable being around Li Ji, and he believed that Li Ji wanted to talk to him about this topic. At one point, Li Ji broke the silence and told Su Yung that rumors that Sejong had changed a lot had reached the very north. Li Ji also said that he had some questions for Su Yung about his work, and he asked Su Yung if he could personally visit his estate to learn more about his teachings. At this moment, Su Yung felt that Li Ji just wanted to compete with him, but he still allowed Li Ji to visit him sometime. The next day, Sangong trained with Ma Il again, and on the same day, Li Ji arrived at Su Yung's estate. Seeing Li Ji, Sangong, and Ma Il couldn't believe that Li Ji was an ordinary person. At this moment, Li Ji looked at Sangong's hand and saw a dumbbell in it, and then Li Ji asked Sangong to let him try to lift it. Before handing the dumbbell to Li Ji, Sangong told him to be careful, as this dumbbell might be much heavier than it might seem at first glance. Li Ji took the dumbbell in his hand and began to lift it, and he was convinced that the dumbbell was indeed somewhat heavy. Sangong was shocked at how Li Ji could bend his arm so easily with the dumbbells in his hand, as Sangong had previously used the dumbbell solely for deadlifting. After this, Li Ji said that he had heard rumors that Su Yung was once able to perform 3 basic exercises with a total load of 1,000 pounds. Li Ji then turned to face Su Yung behind him and asked him how much weight he could lift. A few minutes later, Li Ji prepared to lift a 700-pound barbell, and he successfully completed the task. While Li Ji was deadlifting 700 pounds, Sangong looked at Li Ji and thought that he would not be able to lift that kind of weight even after half a year of hard training. After Li Ji placed the barbell on the ground, Su Yung told him that this was the first time he had seen a person who could successfully handle such weight. At this moment, Su Yung was thinking that in the conditions of this era, Li Ji could be called a strong man from God. At one point, Su Yung thought that Li Ji was dissatisfied with something, but Li Ji tried to hide it by telling Su Yung that he had learned a lot about body training. However, Su Yung asked Li Ji to be more honest, as Su Yung realized that his book had a lot of flaws since he did all the research in his book alone. Recently, Li Ji visited Sejong, and Sejong said that Su Yung had developed a book with new techniques for training the body, and he said that this knowledge could also be used in the military training of soldiers. Su Yung then realized that his training methods would be very difficult to apply to the Joseon military industry. Li Ji said that the book mainly describes muscle-building techniques, while the muscles that are most used when using weapons are hardly developed. Li Ji also said that to use weapons, a soldier must also use other muscle groups, about which almost nothing is written in Su Yung's book. Li Ji also said that the book says that in order to develop muscles, a person must eat enough meat, but in a real battle, an ordinary soldier cannot afford to eat meat. Li Ji also said that due to the current realities of military affairs, healthcare remains only a theoretical science that cannot be used in military craft. At this moment, Su Yung was greatly offended that Li Ji believed that he was unfamiliar with the craft of war. Even though Su Yung did not know the military trade, the young Jik he used to be was very familiar with military affairs, since it was in the army that he began to get involved in bodybuilding. Then Su Yang promised himself that within 3 years he would be able to supplement his book with body-strengthening methods for soldiers. Meanwhile, Sejong was studying another appeal from the ruler of the Ming dynasty. At that moment, Li Qiang arrived with Sejong, who wanted to know why his father had called him to him. Sejong told Li Qiang that the ruler of the Ming dynasty wanted to order 100 units of soap from them, and then Sejong was once again convinced that it was not in vain that his people began to grow so many linden trees. However, Sejong said that the ruler of the Ming dynasty wants to personally meet Su Yang, who created the soap. Sejong knew that Su Yang had no acquaintances or connections with the Ming dynasty, and then Sejong believed that the eunuch from the ministry personally wanted to meet Su Yang. Li Qiang then decided that they should not worry about Su Yang, since of all the people in Joseon he had the broadest outlook, and Li Qiang suggested sending Su Yang to the Ming kingdom as an ambassador. Meanwhile, Su Yang trained hard to update his book with new body-strengthening techniques for Joseon soldiers. The next day, Su Yang continued to train Sang-gun, and throughout his training, Sang-gun was able to achieve significant results. Su Yang praised Sang-gong for being able to lift 500 pounds less than a year after he started training, and Su Yang believed that within the next year, Sang-gong could become a true master. However, Sang-gun believed that he would not become a master in the next year, since even Haiyang could lift much more weight. Afterwards, Sun Ya reminded Su Yang about how much he had previously wanted to take a hostage, and Su Yang believed that Sang-gung had forgotten about it due to his training. However, Sang-gun said that he needs to start looking for a hostage again, since everyone around him is worried that he still doesn't have children. Sang-gun also said that he decided to choose Ham Niang-yun as his concubine, and at that moment Su Yang thought that in the Joseon era, people have children before the age of 20. Su Yang also thought that if in the Joseon era a man was already 20 years old, then instead of a wife he was looking for a concubine, and Sejong at one time had a similar problem, and then his first son was born at 23 years old. Sang-gong believed that Su Yang suspected something, but Su Yang did not know how to explain to Sang-gong that his future one would be killed by his own father. Then Su Yang told Sang-gong that he had read fortunes from the Book of Changes, and he learned that if Sang-gong marries a second time, a mysterious atrocity will overtake his wife. Sang-gong was somewhat surprised that Su Yang was able to foresee not just something bad, but a mysterious atrocity. Su Yang then told Sang-gun that physical strength would help him avoid such a sad fate. At this point, Sang-gong thought that by evil, Su Yang meant something like a thief who would attack him and his wife. Then Sang-gun wondered if a woman could develop her physical abilities. Then Su Yang looked at his wife, who was working hard, and he said that a woman can also develop and strengthen her body. Su Yang also said that he could train his future concubine in martial arts, after which he asked Sang-gun to capture him. Sang-gong grabbed Su Yang by the collar of his t-shirt, and Su Yang told Sang-gong that this grab is the most common move before a fight. Sang-gong then said with a smile on his face that he had also grabbed people this way before, after which he apologized to Su Yang for that he had to grab it like that. At this moment, Su Yang tensed his hands and said that he knew a great way for a person to get out of such a grip. After that, Su Yang tensed his hands even more and hit Sang-gong's forearms, causing Sang-gong to immediately let go of Su Yang. After this technique, Sang-gong fell to the ground, and Su Yang told him that this technique could easily break the attacker's joint. After this technique, Su Yang offered to bring Nian-yun to him so that his wife could teach her similar techniques. For several years, Nian-yun and Su Yang's wife studied self-defense techniques, after which they moved on to practical training. First, Su Yang's wife showed Nian-yun how to hold the opponent from behind, after which Nian-yun tried to repeat the technique, but she did not have enough strength to stably restrain Su Yang's wife. After a few days of training, Nian-yun was able to master several self-defense techniques, but she still did not understand why she had to learn such techniques. Then Sang-gong told Nian-yun that one day these techniques could save her life, and Nian-yun said that she would definitely use these techniques to protect herself from the robber. After some time, one of Su Yang's servants came to him with the news that trouble had happened to Yang Nen. Su Yang learned that Yang Nen's left arm was broken and his teeth were badly damaged, and Su Yang began to guess what really happened. Even though Su Yang taught Nian Yun's self-defense techniques, he did not expect that Nian Yun would be able to inflict such serious injuries on Yang Nen. After this, Su Yang, Sejong, Yang Nen, Nian Yun, and several other people gathered in the palace to find out what really happened. On the day of the incident, Yang Nen was relaxing at home and thinking about how his son started training so hard. At one point, Yang Nen ordered Sangong's new concubine to bring him a cup of tea. After some time, Nian Yun brought Yang Nen his cup of tea, but the dissatisfied Yang Nen immediately threw the cup of tea towards Nian Yun. At this moment, Yang Neng didn't like that Nian Yun took so long to prepare tea for him, which made him feel like Nian Yun grew the tea leaves herself. At one point, Yang Nen stopped shouting at Nian Yun, and then he began to take a closer look at his son's new concubine. Then Yang Nen thought that his son had chosen a very pretty girl for himself, since their tastes in girls were almost similar. After staring for a while, Yang Nen grabbed Nian Yun by the collar of her clothes. Nian Yun was panicked, and then she hit Yang Neng's jaw with her head as quickly as possible. Nian Yun's blow was so strong that after her blow, Yang Nen's teeth and nose were severely damaged. After Yang Nen accidentally let go of Nian Yun, Sangong's concubine immediately grabbed Yang Nen's hand and began to twist it. Nian Yun held Yang Nen's hand so tightly that his hand immediately broke. While clarifying the situation, Sejong turned to the investigator to tell him everything that he managed to find out. The investigator told Sejong that in this case, Prince Yang Neng was beaten by his son's concubine, resulting in several severe injuries. Then Sejong wondered how such a simple concubine as Nian Yun could cripple such a seasoned warrior as Yang Nen. At that moment, Yang Nen told Sejong that Su Yang and Sanggun taught Nian Yun a special technique that made it possible to neutralize almost any person. Then Sejong believed that in such cases the criminal received punishment in the form of execution. Yang Nen also demanded that Sejong execute everyone who was in any way connected with this case, including Su Yang, who taught Nian Yun this deadly technique. After this, Sejong asked Su Yang to tell him what really happened, and Su Yang only said that this technique was taught to him by none other than God himself. After Sejong learned all the details of the situation, he came to the conclusion that Su Yang had developed a new method of defense. After this, Sejong asked everyone who came here on this matter who was really responsible for this incident. At this moment, the Prime Minister wanted to say that considering Yang Neng's disposition and character, he was sure that Yang Nen wanted to kill Nian Yun, while she was simply putting up proper resistance. After that, the head of the judge's order, Yugyamun, said that even though Yang Nen was to blame for all this, Nian Yun also committed a serious crime by damaging Yang Nen's body. At this moment, Sejong found himself in a very difficult position, because even though he knew about Yang Neng's previous atrocities, he still had to make a decision based on state laws. At this moment, Sejong thought that for such actions, Nian Yun was subject to the same punishment as for treason, namely the death penalty. Sejong could not give Nian Yun the death penalty, and he gave Nian Yun the punishment of 20 lashes. A couple of minutes later, Nian Yun was tied to a special wooden cross, after which one of the guards approached her with a whip. Nian Yun was afraid that this guard would start beating her so hard that after the punishment, she would simply not be able to move normally. Suddenly, after a second, the guard prepared to deliver the first blow of the whip to Nian Yun's legs. However, the guard's blow turned out to be so weak that at first Nian Yun did not even realize that she had already been hit. Nian Yun didn't understand why she didn't feel the blow, and then she realized that this guard felt a little sorry for hitting Nian Yun, and he only decided to pretend that he hit Nian Yun hard enough. Then Nian Yun decided to play along with the good guard a little, and then she began to scream very loudly, feigning unbearable pain. At one point, Yang Nen noticed that something was wrong here, and then he stopped the guard, who was already ready to strike a second blow at Nian Yun. Yang Nen noticed that the guard decided to spare Nian Yun, and then he demanded from the guard that after her blows, her legs would be mutilated. However, after just a couple of seconds, Yang Nen pushed the guard aside and grabbed the whip. Yang Nen said that he would do the rest of the blows on Nian Yun himself, after which he swung the kut with all his might. However, within a second, Sejong was standing behind Yang Nen, who told his brother to stop right now. Young Nen didn't understand how Sejong ended up behind him so quickly, since Young Nen was much stronger than Sejong before. At this moment, Young Nen believed that Sejong wanted to leave the person who crippled his brother unharmed. However, Sejong no longer wanted to listen to Young Nen, and he demanded that he shut up right now. Sejong also told Young Nen that if he tried to do something like that, Young Nen would immediately end up in eternal exile. After that, Sejong let go of the whip that Young Nen was holding so tightly, who immediately fell to the ground. Sejong then reminded Young Nen that King Taejong had forbidden him to enter Joseon territory, but today Sejong showed mercy and allowed him to return. Sejong also said that many of his subjects had repeatedly begged him to send Young Nen into exile, and that he was no longer going to tolerate his grave atrocities. After this, Sejong asked the guards to put Young Nen under house arrest, and the guards happily prepared to arrest Young Nen. While the guards were tying Young Nen's hands despite his injury, Young Nen insisted to Sejong that he could not do this to him. After one of the guards tied up Young Nen, he told Sejong that he was ready to proceed to arrest Young Nen. After one of the guards began to take Young Nen away, Sejong asked one of the guards to release Nyan Yun right now. At this moment, Sang-gun was expressing his sincere gratitude to Sejong, and he did not know how he could thank such a merciful king as Sejong. However, Sejong told Sang-gun that he would right now provide him and Nyan Yun with separate housing, where they could live together peacefully. Sejong also felt that Nyan Yun had gone through a lot of difficulties in life, and he said that from now on, they cannot worry about anything and rest peacefully. Soon, Young Nen found himself under strict house arrest, and a few days later Su-young had a daughter, whom he named Ju-hyun. For some time, Su-young lived quietly with his wife and children, but one day an unusual guest came to Su-young's house. This very guest turned out to be Tang-je, who was persistently studying Su-young's book on strengthening the human body and leading a healthy lifestyle. Su-young thought that he had already seen this young man in Chipyeongjong, and Su-young suddenly became curious as to what exactly prompted Tang-ge to put aside all his affairs and visit Su-young. Su-young also noticed that since the last time he saw Tang-ge, his body had become so strong that at first, Su-young didn't even recognize him. Tang-ge said that he started studying Su-young's book after his back began to hurt badly, and after studying the book and doing the exercises, the back pain went away. However, even after the pain in his back went away, Tang-ge did not give up training, and over time, his body became much stronger, and he wanted to personally thank Su-young for such an invaluable contribution. However, Su-young told Tang-ge that there was nothing to thank him for, since he did not train Tang-ge personally. Tang then asked Su-young if he could participate in his physical training program. Su-young thought that if Tang-yi were an ordinary person, he would agree, but Tang-yi was a member of Sayuksin, and if Tang-yi were to study, it could affect the future scientific progress of Joseon. Then Su-young told Tang-ge that he was a little worried that such a talented scientist like him decided to give up studying other sciences and devote himself entirely to training. However, Tang said with full confidence that his friends were more talented scientists, and that it was unlikely that anything could happen if he suddenly decided to change his occupation. Then Su-young believed that Tang-ge wanted to become a sports coach, and Tang-ge confirmed his guesses. Tang-ge also told Su-young that he had already informed the king that he would like to leave Chipyeongjong. Then Su-young told Tang-ge that he was ready to train him, after which they went together for another training session. Before starting the training, Tang decided to introduce himself in front of everyone. Sang-gun already knew Tang, and he believed that Tang had only recently started training, and then Sang-gun told him that he still had a lot to learn. Tang did not argue with Sang-gun, and he asked him to teach him all the necessary exercises. Before teaching Tang new exercises, Tang felt that the first thing he needed to do was check what he was already capable of. At first, Sang-gong suggested testing how many pull-ups Tang could do, and Sang-gong thought that it would be difficult for a beginner like Tang to do this exercise correctly. Sang-gun also decided to brag a little to Tang that in 6 months of hard training, he was able to master 4 skills. However, after a couple of seconds, Sang-gun noticed how easily Tang could do pull-ups, and then Sang-gun started counting the number of times Tang could do pull-ups. Sang-gun felt a little ashamed that he would be able to do as many pull-ups as Tang did, and began to think that Tang was simply doing the exercise incorrectly. Su Yung watched how easily Tange stretched, and he figured that with Tange's arrival, everyone else would also try to exercise with the same tenacity as Tanga. After training, Su Yung went with Tange to a small area that had an impeccable view of the mountains. Tange looked at the forest and thought that with such volumes of raw materials, it would be possible to grow plants with a total volume of 20,000 pounds. Tange thought that if they put all this linden into making soap and started selling it to the Ming dynasty, they could get a lot of money. But Su Yung said that they could get something more than money. At first, Tange didn't understand what Su Yung meant, and Su Yung said that they could achieve a bright future for all of Joseon. Soon, Sejong called Su Yung to tell him that one man named Ugon was able to heal his lower back thanks to Su Young's book, and even doctors could not help this man with his illness. Sejong also told Su Yung that for such achievements he was entitled to a worthy reward, but Sejong had one small request to Su Yung. Sejong asked Su Yung to meet with Prime Minister Huang He, who resigned a month ago due to some health problems, and Sejong asked Su Yung to try to help him. Sejong understood that most likely nothing could be done about the Prime Minister's current condition due to his advanced age, but it would be nice to at least try to do something. Soon, Su Yung went to the estate where the Prime Minister lives, and the local servants were very frightened that Su Yung arrived to them so quickly. At this moment, the Prime Minister's servants began to make a big fuss about Su Young's arrival, but Su Yung himself believed that these people were just a little strange. After this, Su Yung entered the estate, and there he saw an 80-year-old old man and a special person who voiced everything that the old man told him, since it was difficult for him to speak himself. The old man said that he would like to carry out the king's order, but after 70 years of life he developed problems with his lower back. Su Yung told the servants that King Sejong himself sent him here, but Su Yung said that even he could not somehow help the Prime Minister in such a situation. Su Yung also noticed a Paduk board on the Prime Minister's desk, and Su Yung told the Prime Minister that now, due to his condition, he should not play the game anymore. After this, Su Yung put his hand on the board and noticed that the board was warm, from which he concluded that the Prime Minister had been playing Paduk just recently. After this, Su Yung looked at the Prime Minister and told him that there was no way he could help him in this case. However, Su Yung told the Prime Minister that despite such a serious condition, he could still train him to control some processes in his body. After this, the servant told Su Yung on behalf of the Prime Minister that despite the fact that his old body could no longer be fixed, he was still pleased that Su Yung was trying so hard for his health. The servant also told Su Yung on behalf of the Prime Minister that he was very sorry that he could not look at Su Yung on his own, and he said that he would definitely follow his advice. After this, Su Yung stood up and told the Prime Minister that he too hoped that the Prime Minister's condition would improve over time. Before leaving the Prime Minister's estate, Su Yung told his servant that they should warm up the Prime Minister's room, but they should not overdo it because this could lead to disastrous consequences. Su Yung also told the Prime Minister's servant that it was so hot here that even the Paducah board was very warm. After this, Su Yung said goodbye to the Prime Minister and his servant, and he returned back to his estate. When Su Yung returned to the palace, he told Sejong that it was almost impossible to cure the Prime Minister, since the main cause of his illness was his natural old age. Then Sejong thought that if they had started treating the Prime Minister at least 10 years earlier, then perhaps they could have helped him somehow. At this moment, Sejong only thought that if they could help the Prime Minister, then they could discuss and solve many more government affairs together. Sejong also began to remember the time when 10 years ago, he and the Prime Minister spent days and days solving important government problems and making important decisions. During the walk, Sejong asked Su Yung how the classes of his students, whom he actively trains, were going. At that moment, Su Yung remembered how quickly his students get tired, but Su Yung told Sejong that he had come across very talented and capable students. After this, Sejong told Su Yung that he had recently met with Kim Jong, who also believed that Su Yung should develop a training system for training soldiers. Sejong also asked Su Yung about his plans for the Ming Empire, and Su Yung said that after traveling to Beijing, he would also like to go to Hanam, one of the cities in Gyeonggi Province. After Su Yung said that he was going to cover almost half of Beijing, he said that the initial purpose of his trip was to develop livestock farming in Joseon. Su Yung believed that the pigs in Joseon were too small, and he wanted to make sure that every person in Joseon could have the opportunity to eat enough meat. Su Yung also noticed that one Chinese character, which means meat, is associated specifically with a pig, and in the Ming Empire it is very easy to raise and fatten the required number of pigs. However, Sejong guessed that besides animal husbandry, Su Yung had other reasons to travel halfway through the Ming Empire. At this point, Su Yung believed that Sejong was not very happy about his imminent trip, since Su Yung would be traveling around the Ming Empire for a whole year. Then Su Yung told Sejong that in addition to livestock farming, agriculture was highly developed in the Ming Empire, which allows local residents to grow a lot of different vegetables. Su Yung also said that in addition to agricultural samples, Su Yung also wanted to be in Nanjing, where he wanted to get some books. Sejong then reminded Su Yung that Nanjing was an ancient city with a very long and rich history, and he believed that there were indeed a lot of books there. However, Su Yung told Sejong that he was almost completely confident that the head of Suragama, who invited Su Yung, would definitely provide him with all the necessary books. Sejong knew that Wang Jin was so powerful that even the ministers called him father, thereby expressing their respect. Then Su Yung said that if Wang Jin tried to provide proposals that were unfavorable for Joseon, he would refuse them, but otherwise he was ready to conduct mutually beneficial cooperation with him. Afterwards, Sejong remembered that Su Yung just recently had a daughter, and he wondered if Su Yung had discussed his trip with his family, and Su Yung said that he had discussed everything with his wife. The next morning, the ship on which Su Yung was going to go to the Ming Empire sailed to the Joseon pier, and the entire royal family was going to see Su Yung off. Su Young's wife was very worried that she would not see her husband in the next year, but Hyun Don was not at all upset, since due to his age he did not understand how long he would not see his father. Su Young's wife understood that her husband was carrying out matters of national importance, but she was still worried that Su Yung would miss her daughter's first birthday. At this moment, Su Yung began to feel a little nervous because Su Young's wife was speaking very loudly, and Su Yung was worried that more and more people would look at them with incomprehension. At one point, Su Young's wife began to cry in grief, and then Su Yung immediately began to calm his wife down. At this moment, Sejong was so amused watching Su Yung and his wife that he couldn't even contain his laughter. After this, Lee Hyung approached Su Yung and said that while he was away from Joseon, he would look after his wife and children. Su Yung was very grateful to his brother for such help, and Su Yung said that he couldn't wait to meet again. After this, Lee Hyung jokingly told Su Yung that with his departure, Su Yung decided to relieve Chan Young of his job and transfer it to Lee Hyung. Then Su Yung laughed and remembered that this was Chan Young's first vacation in 15 years. Sang Young then began to thank Su Yung for personally asking the king to personally grant Chan Young leave. At this moment, Hyung Don walked up to his father with a small dumbbell in his hand to show his father that he also wanted to become as strong as his father. A second later, Su Yung picked up his son and lifted him up, after which he told him that when he returned home, they would train the bench press together. At one point, Su Yung remembered his conversation with Sejong, who did not understand what Su Yung ultimately wanted to do, since he began to devote so much time to training, animal husbandry, and other things. Su Yung then told Sejong that his dream was to make Joseon the strongest state so that no one could look down on Joseon. Soon, Su Yung and his team set off, and within a few minutes, Pu Such-han, who worked as the royal translator, suddenly began to sneeze non-stop. Su Yung was somewhat surprised that with such a physique, Such-han managed to catch a cold, and Such-han said that he spent too much time in the cold wind. Such-han also punished himself non-stop for catching a cold on such an important trip for Su Yung and all of Joseon. Then Su Yung looked at Such-han and thought that during his journey, he would have the opportunity to force Such-han to take up sports. A few hours later, Su Yung saw the coastline, which indicated that they had almost arrived in the Ming Empire. Before arriving at the port, Su Yung decided to ask his crew if the soap had spoiled during their departure. Then Li Gei and Park Kang, who were scientists from Chip Yongjong, informed Su Yung that in such weather the soap was in excellent condition. Nam Bin, who was responsible for the safety of Su Yung and his team, also went with Su Yung. Then Su Yung said that man is the center of the world, and Su Yung wanted to get to the Ming Empire as soon as possible to see for himself. After Su Yung and his team descended from the ship, they saw in front of them a huge gate that covered their further path to Paektusan. Su Yung and his team were shocked by such a huge structure, and for a moment it seemed to them that such a structure could not be built by man. At this moment, Chang Song, who was one of the emperor's eunuchs, approached Su Yung and his team, and he was a little amused by the reaction of Su Yung and his men upon seeing the gate to the city. Chang Song was supposed to accompany Su Yung and his team around Paektusan and make sure that nothing happened to them during the escort. Suddenly, Li Jie asked Chang Song when they would arrive at the emperor's audience, but Chang Song said that out of the entire team, Su Yung would be the only one who would be able to see the emperor in person. After this, Chang Song decided to calculate how long it would take for the emperor to personally receive Su Yung and his team, and he came to the conclusion that the emperor would receive them in 40 days, which greatly surprised Such Han. Soon, several people with large bags began to come in after Su Yung, and then Chang Song suggested that this was the very goods that Su Yung wanted to transfer to the Ming Empire. Then Chang Sung approached Su Yung and told him that he recently decided to try using his soap, and he really liked it. Su Yung thanked Chang Sung for such nice remarks and said that this soap is far from perfect. Chang Sung was also very surprised when Su Yung said that he improved his soap, making its aroma even more pleasant. After that, Su Yung took one of the bars of soap, showed it to Chang Seong, and said that he had prepared more than 2,000 pounds of soap for the Ming Empire. Chang Sung decided to smell the soap to evaluate its smell, and he was pleasantly surprised by such a pleasant combination of the aroma of flowers and ginseng. After that, Chang Sung put down the soap and told Su Yung that he was pleasantly surprised that a country like Joseon was able to supply such a quality product. After that, Chang Sung began to look at Su Yung with a bit of whim and think that Su Yung was like a fearless general in his physique. Suddenly, unexpectedly for Su Yung, Chang Sung began to touch Su Yung's shoulder and tell him that his shoulders were as strong and wide as those of the god Virudak. Suddenly, Su Yung was shocked by Chang Sung's sudden behavior, and then Such Han politely asked Chang Sung to stop showing such disgusting behavior. Su Yung soon found himself at Emperor Zheng Tong's palace to greet him in person. After the greeting, the emperor told Su Yung that he had heard that Sejong had very talented sons, and he said that he also tried using soap. The emperor said that he was amazed at how easily all the dirt came off his skin after the soap, but he was even more surprised that this soap was created by Sejong's youngest son. The emperor also told Su Yung that he was pleased that Su Yung and his team had brought 2,000 pounds of soap, and the emperor wanted to talk to Su Yung about establishing trade ties. After this, Su Yung thanked the emperor, and at that moment it seemed to Su Yung that the situation suddenly became somehow hostile and tense. After Su Yung left the emperor's palace, he noticed that the emperor's servants around him began to look at him and his team with disgust. At this point, the servants began to discuss how much the emperor's eunuchs who accompanied Su Yung and his team stank. Su Yung continued to walk along the road, trying not to think about why these people were looking at him with such disgust. Soon, Su Yung and his team reached the exit, where they were met by the emperor's eunuchs, who were waiting for them. Su Yung told the eunuchs that thanks to them, he was able to meet the emperor in person, and he told the eunuchs that thanks to them, he would be able to get an audience in just 10 days. Su Yung also said that their future descendants would sing about this great event, but Chang Song suddenly interrupted Su Yung and asked him if he knew who he was talking to now. Su Yung said that he had already heard rumors that Soragam was led by a certain Dane, whom ministers and officials respectfully called father. Dane then lowered his fan slightly and told Su Yung that he admired Su Yung's intelligence. After this, a couple of eunuchs told Su Yung that they really liked the soap that Su Yung had previously sent them, and they were very happy when they learned that Su Yung had brought a shipment of soap weighing 2,000 pounds. Then the eunuchs asked Su Yung how much it cost him to create this soap, and Su Yung said that the price very much depended on the ingredients. Su Yung said that soap with ginseng scent costs 10 mali, and soap with incense costs 6 mali. Then Dane calculated that 600 grams of soap costs about 40 grams of silver, and then Dane asked Su Yung how he produces his soap. Such Han thought that this was a very mean question on Dain's part, since he believed that Dain was going to steal the method of making soap and start selling it himself. However, Su Yung had no problem telling Dain that first, to make soap, the Joseon people collect seaweed from Hamildo Island and begin to dry it. Then even Dain was somewhat surprised that Su Yung would so easily tell him the secret of making soap, without fear that Dain might simply steal his recipe. However, after this, Dane told Su Yung that the emperor had recently imposed a ban on the extraction of sea products, due to which they could not independently obtain seaweed and dry it to make soap. It was for this reason that the Ming Empire had to ask Joseon to supply them with soap, which greatly reassured Su Han. Then Dane asked Su Yung if it would be possible to increase the production rate of new batches of fragrant soap for their further delivery to the Ming Empire. Then Su Yung asked Dane how much soap the empire needed, and Dane said that 6 tons of soap needed to be brought to the empire, which amazed Su Yung very much. Dane also demanded that despite the increase in production, the quality must be equally high, and even the eunuchs found this to be very difficult. After that, Dane removed the fan from his face and told Su Yung that when concluding a contract, representatives of different parties must look each other in the face. Dane closed his fan, showed his face to Su Yung, and introduced himself as Wang Zhen, the eunuch of Soragama. After this, Wang Zhen told Su Yung that their deal was successful, and then he offered his help to Su Yung in whatever he needed. Su Yung told Wang Zhen that he had come to the Ming Empire to bring them their products. Then Wang Zhen asked Su Yung if he could bring a batch of soap to the empire if Wang Zhen gave him 2 tons of silver. At one moment, Su Yung and Such Han could not believe that Wang Zhen could give them 2 tons of silver right now. Then Su Yung thought that he should not think about silver, since he believed that soon crops and livestock would be much more valuable than silver. After his thoughts, Su Yung told Wang Zhen that Joseon would do everything possible to bring more soap to the empire. Wang Zhen then told Su Yung and his team that he would do everything possible to make their trip as pleasant as possible, after which Wang Zhen and his eunuchs left the grounds of the emperor's palace. Once Wang Zhen and the rest of the eunuchs left, Such Han told Su Yung that he probably understood why the eunuchs were actually so interested in fragrant soap. Such Khan told Su Yung that in the empire, eunuchs are completely deprived of their male sexual organ, which shocked Su Yung very much. Such Khan also said that because of this, the eunuchs cannot control the process of urination, which is why the eunuchs always had a very strong and disgusting smell. It was at this moment that Su Yung realized why the eunuchs were so interested in supplying soap to the empire. After Su Yung and his team left the territory of the emperor's palace, a luxurious carriage drove up to them. Soon 3 people got out of the carriage, who were just looking for Su Yung and his team. Then one of the people who got out of the carriage told Su Yung and his team that Wang Zhen himself had told him to personally ensure that Su Yung and his team's journey was as pleasant as possible.